Chapter 708. Otsutsuki Kagaya, an existence that was completely submerged in the torrent of time. Even the existence of Hagoromo Sennin is still like a myth in the ninja world, but there is no record of Otsutsuki Kagaya, the mother of Hagoromo Sennin. The reason for that was because such an existence was simply too terrifying. In the past, the two brothers Hagoromo and Himura did their best to seal Otsutsuki Kagaya's mother. After that, the two Sennin also ran out of energy and didn't extend their lifespan for long. Black Zetsu, the third son of Otsutsuki Kagaya, wanted to use various means to reunite the Jubi and resurrect his mother in the countless years after that. In the past history of the ninja world, it's not that the Rinnegan was not born under the guidance of Black Zetsu, but because the Jubi didn't gather, he couldn't resurrect Otsutsuki Kagaya. After experiencing repeated failures, Black Zetsu finally began to seriously plan a detailed and huge plan. Not only did he include a few key people in his plan, but he also wanted to pull the entire ninja world into such a plan. This layout has been extended from the first appearance of Uchiha Madara and Senju Takuma to the present for nearly 100 years. For nearly 100 years, Black Zetsu has been using all his mind to perfect and implement such a plan. A lot of time, coupled with the understanding of human beings accumulated by Black Zetsu in the past countless years, and the control of people's hearts, all of these made everything continue to develop according to the script specified by Black Zetsu. Although there are some small differences in some details, on the whole, it is still playing out according to Black Zetsu's script. Seeing Uchiha Madara directly restrained like this, Black Zetsu has already understood that his opportunity has come. Using a wisp of his own body hidden in the arm cut off from Obito, he invaded the body of the Jubi, the Geto Mazo. Because his power and the Jubi's chakra have the same root, Black Zetsu easily turned the chakra of the Jubi into his own. After that, Uchiha Madara continued to fight, mobilizing the Jubi's chakra again and again to let Black Zetsu continue to invade Uchiha Madara's body. After Uchiha Madara experienced the fist fight with Naruto and the siege of Nangongji, Black Zetsu could feel that his invasion of Uchiha Madara's body was at least half completed. It was also the opportunity for Uchiha Madara to extract a large amount of Chakra 2's body to repair. Black Zetsu directly began the final invasion. Black Madara's body, and a large amount of Rinnegan power contained in Uba's chakra, and a large amount of Rinnegan's Izes, and Rinnegan of Sharu's. It seems that Black Zetsu thought that just absorbing the energy contained in Uchiha Madara's body was still not enough, and a strong suction force also directly acted on the huge Jubi tree beside Uchiha Madara. After being pulled by Black Zetsu, the Jubi tree, which had already materialized, turned back into the purest chakra and rushed directly into Black Zetsu's body. "Mother, wake up." Black Zetsu finally spoke again after attaching himself to Madara's body. At this moment, Black Zetsu's voice no longer had the usual undisguised ridicule, but it was full of respect for creating his own life and making his own existence meaningful. Black Zetsu's body began to transform directly in a flash. The Jubi, which had been sealed in the human body as a source of energy, was completely integrated into Black Zetsu's body at this moment. Gradually, Black Zetsu's deep black began to gradually change, turning into a silver-white long hair, pure white eyes, and a dark red Rinnegan in the middle of the eyebrows. A large robe wrapped her body in it, and a powerful momentum swept the entire battlefield directly from the moment she appeared. However, Watergate, Nangongji, Naruto, and Sasuke directly lost control of their bodies at the moment when Otsutsuki Kagaya appeared. It felt like the person who appeared in front of them was the creator of the world. No matter how strong they were just a group of ants in front of her. After a short adaptation, Otsutsuki Kagaya finally opened his half-open eyes completely, and the almost white eyes in his eyes directly bloomed with invisible energy at this moment. With this energy, Nangongji, Sasuke, Naruto, and Watergate, who were already difficult to move because of the deterrent force, were now tightly controlled and unable to move. Byakugan, coercion. It's not the power of Jubi, but the power of Otsutsuki Kagaya's own bloodline. The average enemy, after being hit by the impact of Byakugan, coercion, will even directly fall to the ground and die because of the physical and mental pressure. Nangongji, Sasuke, Naruto, and Watergate were very strong, so after being hit by such an impact, their bodies were only controlled, and they did not suffer any substantial damage. Originally, Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes were a little confused because he had just arrived in this world. After looking around with his eyes, he suddenly saw Uzumaki Naruto, who was wrapped in Rikudo coat, and Uchiha Sasuke, who had 6 Tomo Rinnegan in one eye. Although Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't know the faces of Naruto and Sasuke, Otsutsuki Kagaya sensed the breath from Naruto and Sasuke that was connected to his own blood. Hamura Hagoromo? Looking at Naruto and Sasuke, Otsutsuki Kagaya suddenly put his hand gently on Naruto and Sasuke's cheeks. Ignoring the resistance of Naruto and Sasuke, Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes at this moment only had a kind of care for his own blood relatives. Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes were also seen by Naruto and Sasuke. This kind of look was no different from Shina Kushina and Mikoto's eyes. It was the look of a mother looking at her child. For some reason Naruto and Sasuke also seemed to see their mother. The resistance in their eyes gradually subsided and was replaced by a different kind of affection and gentleness. After all, if you have to say what kind of emotion can affect a person the most, a mother's unconditional love for her children must be one of the indisputable ones. Chapter 709. Gently stroking Naruto and Sasuke's cheeks, 2 lines of clear tears flowed directly from Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes. Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes were very calm, and there was no unresolvable sorrow, but tears continued to emerge like a broken dam. Although Otsutsuki Kagaya was called a demon because of his past actions, it has to be said that Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart is still full of love for his 2 children, Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Hamura. Even if his 2 children directly sealed him, there was no way for him to be free for thousands of years. Mother. These 2 people are the reincarnation of Indra and Azura, the 2 children of Hagoromo who sealed you for thousands of years. Black Zetsu hid in Otsutsuki Kagaya's wide sleeve and said to Otsutsuki Kagaya. Hearing Black Zetsu's words, Otsutsuki Kagaya finally understood what the intimacy he felt from his heart was. Aren't Naruto and Sasuke his grandsons in disguise? For his family, Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart is full of care and love. At this moment, looking at Uchiha, Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto, his eyes became softer and softer like a clear lake. Looking at Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes, Naruto and Sasuke's spirits gradually relaxed. After all, even if people with such eyes have personality problems, as long as they can communicate well, there must be hope for reconciliation. Naruto and Sasuke were very clear that under Black Zetsu's plan, all the power of Uchiha Madara and Jubi was concentrated to resurrect the former goddess of Uno, Otsutsuki Kagaya. In the previous spiritual space, Hagoromo Sannin also told Naruto and Sasuke some information about his mother. She came from another world in order to seize the chakra fruit, and became the first person to use infinite Tsukuyomi because of the war. What Otsutsuki Kagaya had done at this moment kept reminding Naruto and Sasuke that the woman in front of them looked gentle and tender, but in her heart, there was a cold-blooded demon that could not be ignored. Children, Otsutsuki Kagaya looked at Naruto and Sasuke, his eyes were very soft. When he was about to say something to Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto, suddenly his eyes glanced in other directions. Watergate and Nangongja were directly shocked by Otsutsuki Kagaya's powerful momentum when he first appeared. After that, Otsutsuki Kagaya directly used a special ability like Byakugan Coercion, which almost directly subdued Watergate and Nangongja. After that, Otsutsuki Kagaya has been standing in front of Sasuke and Naruto. Although he didn't know the reason, Otsutsuki Kagaya touched Naruto and Sasuke's cheeks with tears. Perhaps Shuei men did not know much about the matters of ancient times, but Nangongja had read many ancient books in the Bloodcloak Pavilion. He knew a little about the things that happened in ancient times. From the moment Naruto and Sasuke met together, Naruto's very conspicuous six-paths coat and Sasuke's six-tomo Rinnegan made Nangongja think that Naruto and Sasuke should have been in contact with the legendary realm of six-paths Sannin. According to the records in the ancient books and the reality, and the Hagoromo mentioned by Black Zetsu just now, it was the six-paths Sannin, Otsutsuki Hagoromo who sealed his mother. Although Nangongja didn't know what happened in ancient times, Nangongja understood that Otsutsuki Kagaya was very dangerous. Letting Naruto and Sasuke stay by Otsutsuki Kagaya's side was definitely not a good thing. Although Nangongja's nature has always been not so bloodthirsty, when Nangongja judged that a person was dangerous and could bring enough threat to himself and his loved ones, Nangongja would use thunderous means to directly attack such a person, regardless of whether the person was stronger or weaker than himself. At the moment when he was restricted, Nangongja had been trying various ways to break through this restriction. Finally, Nangongja found an effective way to compress the internal strength and sword energy in his body almost to the limit, and then gather all the energy together and directly burst at a point. The power that bound Nangongja was actually broken by Nangongja. The reason why Otsutsuki Kagaya suddenly stopped talking was because Nangongja broke through the shackles of his Byakugan Coercion. The power in this guy's body? As the source of chakra, Otsutsuki Kagaya naturally also saw Nangongja's energy for the first time. The energy in his body was not chakra, but a more peculiar way of cultivation. Seemingly aware of Otsutsuki Kagaya's doubts, Black Zetsu, who was hidden in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve, also said to Otsutsuki Kagaya, "Mother, this person's name is Nangongja, and he is a very different existence from a ninja. The energy flowing in his body is not chakra, which is a mixture of spiritual energy and physical energy, but a strange energy extracted from the body and mixed with the natural energy in the air." Such a group of people called internal strength cultivators used to be extremely popular, and even for a period of time, such a group of people even directly occupied the absolute advantage in the confrontation with ninjas. It's just that I don't know why, but such a group of people declined. The person standing in front of you now is the best internal strength cultivator in the past 100 years. Because Otsutsuki Kagaya has been sealed for too long, he really doesn't know much about the current situation of the ninja world, so at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya mainly relies on his third son, who is actually a derivative of his consciousness, Black Zetsu, to provide the corresponding information for him. Internal strength cultivator? In fact, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't quite understand what the so-called internal strength is, but he still felt a very strong killing intent from Nangongja. This kind of malicious killing intent made Otsutsuki Kagaya feel very uncomfortable. He slightly frowned and almost didn't use any special attack method, just simply waved his hand, and a large amount of energy was directly released from his palm, directly hitting Nangongja. Chapter 7:10. If you have to find something that Kagaya hates the most, then war must be the most unbearable thing for Kagaya. It was because of his hatred for war that Kagaya directly used his powerful strength to quell the war in the ninja world. Since Kagaya hated war so much, it was naturally unbearable for Nangongja's murderous aura. Even after Otsutsuki Kagaya's spirit had a problem and became violent due to the influence of the chakra fruit, Otsutsuki Kagaya still didn't take away their lives, but directly erased the consciousness of the gods and turned them into living puppets. This can be regarded as a kind of persistence against killing and war, right? Originally, after seeing Otsutsuki Kagaya's gentle eyes, Naruto and Sasuke thought that the two of them could communicate with Otsutsuki Kagaya, and then let Otsutsuki Kagaya release those who were bound in the divine tree and lift the infinite Tsukuyomi for the people in this world. However, Kagaya's sudden attack made Naruto and Sasuke no longer have any thoughts of communicating with Kagaya. After all, the relationship between Nangongja, Sasuke, and Naruto was very close. Nangongja only slightly broke free from Kagaya's shackles, and Kagaya directly attacked him? No matter when, in fact, the human heart is full of prejudice. They will always unconsciously favor those who are closer to them, instead of really observing everything calmly like a bystander. Although such a nature will bring all kinds of drawbacks, it is also this nature that makes humans full of humanity. In Sasuke and Naruto's hearts, although they were slightly relaxed because of Kagaya's behavior, after all, Kagaya's dangerous aura and powerful strength still made Naruto and Sasuke involuntarily palpitate. At this moment they saw that Nangongja, who was very close to them, was directly hit by Kagaya. From the blood splashing in the air, it was obvious that Nangongja was seriously injured. Although Kagaya's behavior was understandable, it also filled Sasuke and Naruto's hearts with anger. Naruto and Sasuke's Great Sun Mark and Bright Moon Mark, which represented the power of 6 paths of Yang and Yin respectively, were activated at the same time. The phantoms of Great Sun and Bright Moon appeared directly behind Naruto and Sasuke, and in the Great Sun and Bright Moon, 2 Buddha statues representing Asura and Indra were faintly sitting with various weapons. Although Naruto and Sasuke's attack speed was very fast, it was still much worse for Kagaya. Even when Naruto and Sasuke attacked, Kagaya had already reacted. But Kagaya, who turned to face Naruto and Sasuke, didn't fight back at all. He just let Naruto's fist hit his abdomen and Sasuke's kick to the side of his body. Otsutsuki Kagaya has a special ability, which is the Immortal body. For Kagaya, any ninjutsu and taijutsu attack is meaningless because ninjutsu will be absorbed by Kagaya, and the damage caused by taijutsu is not worth mentioning at all for Kagaya's strong recovery ability. This is also why when Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke attacked him, Kagaya didn't dodge at all and directly let the two's attacks fall on his body. Naruto and Sasuke's attacks didn't have any impact on Kagaya at all. No, it can't be said that there was no impact. Because at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes were filled with extreme coldness. The moment he saw Naruto and Sasuke, Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Himura, his mind was indeed filled with his 2 children who had been sealed by him. Although Otsutsuki Kagaya has some resentment towards his two children, but at the same time, Otsutsuki Kagaya has an unresolvable love for his two children. After seeing Naruto and Sasuke and learning about their lives from Black Zetsu's mouth, Otsutsuki Kagaya himself had some expectations. He was looking forward to the two people standing in front of him to be different from his two children, and to be obedient and become his family. But he just punished an ant who dared to offend his dignity, and now these two children dared to directly attack him? Kagaya's heart was very puzzled, but he was also very angry. Just because of an ant, Naruto and Sasuke dared to directly attack him. Otsutsuki Kagaya turned around and didn't attack. In fact, he was giving Naruto and Sasuke a chance. As long as the two children can stop in time, Otsutsuki Kagaya will not attack. After all, children are more or less naughty. As long as they don't touch the bottom line, it's understandable for Otsutsuki Kagaya. But once his child touches the bottom line, Otsutsuki Kagaya also believes that it is necessary to educate such a child to a certain extent. When Sasuke and Naruto's attack fell on Kagaya's body, the twisted emotions in Kagaya's heart also directly accumulated to the extreme. Disobedient children need to be taught a lesson. 80 God's air attack. Kagaya's tone was very cold. Obviously the anger in his heart has accumulated to the extreme. The powerful chakra directly condensed in Kagaya's body. He clenched his hand into a fist and put it on his waist. Suddenly, he turned his fist into a palm and directly slapped in front of himself. The powerful chakra condensed in his body also directly vented in the direction of this palm. A huge, almost palm-shaped chakra rushed directly in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke stretched his hand in front of his body, and the power of 6 Tomo Rinnegan was instantly launched. The ability of Gekido was used by Uchiha Sasuke to resist the powerful chakra torrent. Naruto condensed all the floating truth-seeking balls behind him in front of him. 9 truth-seeking balls were constantly rotating in front of Naruto. Through the special ability of truth-seeking balls, they were constantly decomposing a large number of chakra rushing towards his position. Chapter 7:11. Kagaya's attacks continued in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke. Although Naruto and Sasuke have done their best to resist the attacks launched by Kagaya, in the face of Kagaya's almost endless waves of attacks, Naruto and Sasuke felt a little overwhelmed and shaky. At this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya's 80 Gods Hollow Strike actually doesn't have any so-called chakra nature change or form change. It's just a simple release of all the chakra in one's body from one's own body, and the faint palm shape of this move is actually because Otsutsuki Kagaya's chakra is too pure and condensed, and it's released from his own palm. Kagaya's moves were full of a sense of simplicity and power from ancient times. It was also such a fighting style that made Naruto and Sasuke, who have always paid attention to each other's consumption, sneak attacks, and other slightly sinister methods, somewhat unprepared. Originally, the battle between ninjas was like waving a sharp blade in the shadows to attack each other. Although it's not that there's no direct confrontation, even in a direct confrontation, any ninja will instinctively start to calculate how to achieve the greatest effect with the least consumption. But at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya directly used his huge power to deal a crushing blow to the enemy, like a divine weapon descending from the sky. Naruto and Sasuke have seen such an attack method on Uchiha Madara, but in such an attack method, Kagaya still has a greater advantage than Uchiha Madara. This advantage is not only from the difference in chakra reserves and physical fitness, but more importantly, it's a difference in mentality. Although Uchiha Madara once used his powerful strength to suppress the entire ninja world, after all, he was still suppressed by Senju Takuma, the first Hokage. It's not an exaggeration to say that anything Uchiha Madara does, Senju Takuma can do it, and it's even likely to do it better. Although Uchiha Madara's character is domineering and wild, there has always been someone suppressing him, which also suppressed Uchiha Madara's character to a certain extent. But Kagaya Otsutsuki is different, because Kagaya Otsutsuki himself can easily calm the raging war on the earth when he came to this world. In other words, the title of Goddess of Uno for Kagaya Otsutsuki is not just an honorific title. Kagaya Otsutsuki is a living god for the world at that time. As a true god recognized by the world, the mentality of Kagaya Otsutsuki and Uchiha Madara will naturally be very different. For Kagaya Otsutsuki, it's normal for everything in the world to submit to him. Since he's uncomfortable in his heart, he can directly show his anger and let these fools understand his horror and power. Damn it. It looks like I can't hold it anymore. The special ability of the Rikudo of the 6 paths of Rinnegan's Gekido itself is an ability to absorb the enemy's chakra into his body and use it, but the so-called absorption is not endless. the amount of chakra that can be accommodated in a person's body is actually limited. Facing the vast amount of chakra that belongs to Kagaya Otsutsuki, the amount of chakra that Sasuke can absorb at this moment has reached a limit, and even the meridians in his body have become swollen because of a large amount of chakra. From the outside, Sasuke looks extremely ferocious at this moment. Sasuke, you step back and rest for a while, I will buy you some time. Naruto has also seen that Sasuke's body has reached a limit at this moment, and immediately said to Sasuke. Sasuke and Naruto have been together for many years, and the trust between them is also beyond ordinary people. After hearing Naruto's words, Sasuke didn't say much nonsense, but directly withdrew his ability as Naruto said, and then turned directly behind Naruto. However, Sasuke didn't rest as Naruto said. Instead, he directly put his hands behind Naruto's back, and the pure chakra that he just absorbed from Kagaya's attack was also directly transferred to Naruto's body under Sasuke's control. As the first human to eat the chakra fruit, the chakra in Kagaya's body can be said to be the source of chakra in everyone's body. After the neutral and peaceful chakra was injected into Naruto's body, Naruto could clearly feel that the chakra in his body even became a lot purer because of this chakra. Naruto naturally understood Sasuke's intention to transfer such chakra into his body. Naruto immediately transferred this pure chakra directly to the 9 truth-seeking balls that were constantly rotating in front of him. The 9 truth-seeking balls swelled slightly due to the influx of a large amount of chakra. The 9 truth-seeking balls directly began to rotate at high speed under the joint energy infusion of Naruto and Sasuke, and even directly turned into the shape of a ring because of the high speed. The truth-seeking balls continued to rotate, and their size continued to increase. The ring became bigger and bigger, and it didn't take long for the ring to expand directly to the point where it almost covered the sky. The thin and large ring almost completely enveloped Kagaya's 80 Gods Air attack, and the ability of the truth-seeking balls to offset energy was directly exerted to the extreme at this moment. Although Kagaya's 80 Gods Air attack was very powerful, in essence, it directly crushed the enemy's attack through a large amount of chakra. Once his chakra couldn't attack the enemy or was directly offset, it was naturally meaningless. These two kids are really good, but they still chose the wrong opponent. Kagaya saw Naruto and Sasuke working together to fight against him, and even now there was a direct tie. His eyes flashed with a trace of appreciation, but after the appreciation he still felt a trace of anger. After all, as the goddess of Uno, he didn't allow anyone to damage his majesty. Although the cooperation between Sasuke and Naruto was quite effective, it was still slightly inferior to him. Although it seems that Naruto and Sasuke are at a disadvantage at the moment, Black Zetsu's heart didn't dare to relax at all, because Naruto and Sasuke are simply existences with legendary lives. How old are Naruto and Sasuke now? They're only 16 or 17 years old, but how many people in the history of the shinobi world can possess the power that these two people possess? Youth is the weakness of Naruto and Sasuke. After all, youth represents the weakness of combat experience and experience. But youth is also the biggest advantage of Naruto and Sasuke. Now that Naruto and Sasuke are so powerful, if the potential of the two is stimulated again, how far will the two of them go? It is precisely because he knows what kind of threat Naruto and Sasuke have that Black Zetsu pays so much attention to them at this moment. And Black Zetsu has already begun to think about how to defeat these two young powerhouses if Naruto and Sasuke succeed in resisting this wave of attacks. Break for me. Facing the powerful 80 Gods Air attack, Naruto and Sasuke's hearts were full of pressure, but because of the pressure, Naruto and Sasuke's unyielding will burned again. Chakra, 6 paths power, Senjutsu chakra, and so on in their body as long as it can be called energy, were all released by Naruto and Sasuke without any restrictions. And the powerful 80 Gods Air attack also showed a small crack under the joint efforts of Naruto and Sasuke. The dike of 1,000 miles collapses because of an ant's nest. They are not afraid of causing little damage, but they are afraid that there is no way to cause damage at all. After seeing the birth of the crack, Naruto and Sasuke's eyes inevitably showed some joy, and then even their tired bodies suddenly gave birth to strength at this moment. Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other and tacitly attacked again without caring about the consumption. Crack. A crisp sound directly appeared in Naruto and Sasuke's ears. 80 Gods Air attack was broken. The huge chakra palm was broken in an instant, and the condensed palm-shaped chakra scattered around like pieces of broken glass. In the process of scattering, these fragments directly turned into energy light spots and directly integrated into the air. Seeing that Naruto and Sasuke's joint efforts actually broke her attack directly, although Otsutsuki Kagaya's face was still cold, but in her eyes, there was an unavoidable look of astonishment. This situation was obviously beyond Otsutsuki Kagaya's expectations. Mother-sama, Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke got 6 pads Yang power and 6 pads Yin power respectively from Hagoromo. When the two of them cooperate to attack or do other things together, they will form a strange resonance with each other, which will increase the strength of the two people at the same time beyond each other's limits. So if you want to deal with these two people, it's better to separate them directly and defeat them one by one. Black Zetsu was hidden in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve and said his judgment to Otsutsuki Kagaya. For Black Zetsu, Otsutsuki Kagaya has almost extreme trust. Seeing Black Zetsu's suggestion, Otsutsuki Kagaya thought about it and nodded, apparently agreeing with Black Zetsu's proposal. A large number of chakra condensed on Otsutsuki Kagaya's forehead. The Scarlet Rinnegan, which originally only revealed a gap, slowly opened at this moment, and a terrifying pressure came out of it. Chapter 7:13. Heaven's Defense. When the eye on his forehead was fully opened, a powerful coercion also came out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The target of this coercion was not Naruto, Sasuke or Watergate standing below him, but the sky above him. Under the impact of Rinnegan of 9 Tomo, the sky was directly penetrated, and the penetrated part was like a piece of torn paper, directly swallowed by the dark hole that suddenly appeared above the sky. Naruto, Sasuke and Watergate didn't know what kind of ninjutsu the so-called Heaven's Defense was, but from the current performance, Heaven's Defense must be a ninjutsu that involves the concept of space. Perhaps because most of his energy was invested in releasing such a powerful ninjutsu as Heaven's Defense, Otsutsuki Kagaya's powerful Byakugan coercion also weakened a bit. Watergate took advantage of the weakening of the shackles on himself and rushed directly to the place where Uchiha and Sasuke were. Watergate's research on space ninjutsu is very profound, and he was directly in Uchiha Obito's Kamui space before, and he felt what kind of existence the artificially created different spaces at a close distance. Now, by observing the weak spatial energy coming from the Heaven's Defense, Shuemin was able to determine that the Heaven's Defense contained a vast space. There is a mark of Flying Thunder God on Naruto's body, but he didn't leave it on Sasuke's body. Once they step into a large space like Heaven's Defense, they will be separated, then the space ninjutsu, Flying Thunder God Jutsu, he mastered will be their last life-saving straw. A powerful suction directly enveloped Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate and the land around them. Gravel and trees were directly pulled by the powerful suction force in the black hole created by Heaven's Defense, and began to be slowly sucked in. The suction speed of Heaven's Defense wasn't very fast, but the people who were controlled by it felt like their bodies were injected with lead. They couldn't move at all, they could only wait for themselves to be sucked into the bottomless black hole full of mystery. No, I must leave a mark on Sasuke's body, otherwise Naruto and I have no way to deal with Otsutsuki Kagaya. In the battle just now, Watergate has fully seen the strength of Otsutsuki Kagaya herself. From the beginning to the end, Otsutsuki Kagaya only used 80 God's Hollow Attack and Heaven's Defense, 2 ninjutsu and showed her huge amount of chakra. But these 2 ninjutsu and the almost endless pure chakra already made Watergate's heart full of shock. As the ancestor of chakra, the goddess of Uno, Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate doesn't believe that she only has these 2 special abilities. Although his body is very heavy now, Watergate can still move his body slightly in such an environment. However, according to Watergate's judgment, this incomplete Flying Thunder God's mark will only make him a little distance away from Sasuke when he teleports, and it will not directly cause him to be unable to use Flying Thunder God Jutsu to get close to Sasuke. At this moment, although Watergate was also absorbed into Heaven's Defense, his heart has been a lot more stable. After all, some preparations have been made. What he needs to do now is to counter every move and find every opportunity to fight against Otsutsuki Kagaya. Chapter 7:14. Watergate, Sasuke and Naruto were sucked into Heaven's Defense one after another. Kagaya saw that his main attack targets were all sucked in, and he also began to prepare to use Yomiuri Yamasaka to move directly into Heaven's Defense. But just as Otsutsuki Kagaya was about to close the entrance of Heaven's Defense, a black shadow suddenly rushed from the ground and rushed directly into the dark hole of Heaven's Defense. Although the movement of the black figure was very fast, with Otsutsuki Kagaya's strength, it was naturally very easy to judge the true identity of this person. This black shadow was naturally Nangongja, who was wearing a black lion-patterned armor and holding the Heaven's Disaster Sword. Nangongja suffered a certain injury from Kagaya's sudden attack, but at the same time, Nangongja directly escaped from the range of Kagaya's Byakugan coercion. After escaping from such a controlled range, Nangongja did not return to the battlefield again, because Nangongja was very clear that the main force against Kagaya was Naruto and Sasuke, who had 6-path Yang power and 6-path Yin power. And in his current state, even if he really returned to the battlefield, he would only be easily hit by Kagaya again. So when Nangongja regained control of his body, he immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and began to restore his internal strength and sword chi. Nangongja was still aware of everything that was happening on the battlefield. Even when he was meditating, he was still paying attention to everything that was happening on the battlefield. Nangongja watched Kagaya use 80 God's hollow attack, and also saw Naruto and Sasuke desperately fighting against Kagaya, but Nangongja still resisted the urge to help Naruto and Sasuke, and abruptly pressed himself here to restore his internal strength and sword chi. Since Nangongja became famous, although he has experienced many difficult battles, but now, his heart is constantly filled with regret for his weakness. How long has it been since such a feeling appeared in Nangongja's heart? After seeing Kagaya use Heaven's defense, Nangongja knew that if he didn't set foot on the battlefield, then he would only push Watergate, Naruto, and Sasuke into the battlefield alone. So after Nangongja was ready, he put on the Black Lion heavy armor, and rushed towards Kagaya's Heaven's defense with all his strength. A moth to the flame, Kagaya watched Nangongja rush directly into the space he created, and his eyes were filled with a bit of ridicule. Otsutsuki Kagaya did not intend to stop Nangongja, because the world that Nangongja had rushed into was a cage that he had created himself. If he rushed in, it would not be easy to get out. He forcibly controlled Naruto, Sasuke, and Watergate, and then absorbed them in order to deal with them. Now that Nangongja rushed directly into Heaven's defense, what's there to stop? Once the accumulation is completed, Otsutsuki Kagaya will immediately go to each space to defeat his 4 enemies one by one. Chapter 7:15. Looking at the slightly greenish ground under his feet that looked like a layer of sharp spikes, Nangongja's forehead involuntarily dripped with sweat. Nangongja entered Heaven's defense in his black armor. In the beginning, Nangongja himself was suspended in a black space. Although it wasn't the same, Nangongja knew that this black space was the same as the space crevice he saw when he was searching for the Lion Clan's space. Before Nangongja had time to take a good look, a huge suction force suddenly appeared behind Nangongja and pulled him into this strange space. After entering this space, Nangongja quickly noticed the strangeness of this space. After entering this space, Nangongja clearly felt that his body had become heavier. It was as if the air around him and his body had become heavier. Even his movements were hindered. Nangongja could feel that his body had become at least 5 times heavier. Now Nangongja could barely maintain his standing posture. It was already very difficult for him to not be knocked down by such a strong pressure. Feeling that his body had slightly adapted to the gravity in this space, Nangongja began to slowly move his feet. He wanted to explore the specific situation of this space. After walking for less than a meter, Nangongja suddenly felt that the pressure on his body had become lighter. However, Nangongja was not in a hurry. Instead, he slowly walked in the direction he had randomly chosen. After walking for less than a meter, a pressure that was 5 times stronger than the previous gravity directly acted on Nangongja's body. As expected, this space isn't a simple place. Gravity itself was a force that acted on a person's entire body. From the inside out, the person would be squeezed by gravity. After undergoing professional training, the limit of gravity that a person could withstand was 3 times the normal gravity. Moreover, this was only bearable. It did not mean that a person could walk freely under such gravity. Once the theoretical limit of 3 times the normal gravity was exceeded, the human body would bleed profusely. The organs in the body would also become dysfunctional or even directly rupture due to the huge pressure. Because Nangongja had powerful strength, inner strength, and sword chi to protect his body, the fragile organs in his body were already protected. This was also the important reason why Nangongja could barely move in a space with gravity that exceeded the limit of the human body. According to the current situation, the gravity in this supergravity space was not evenly distributed. Instead, the magnitude of the gravity would change from place to place. With such a change, not to mention fighting, even the simplest of walking would be a problem. Just as Nangongja was still walking around in this supergravity space, he suddenly saw a familiar thing in a corner of the ground, the flying thunder god Kanai. This Kanai, could it be that Watergate also entered this space? Looking at the flying thunder god Kanai that was inserted diagonally into the ground, Nangongja roughly judged the trajectory of this Kanai. It was obvious that Watergate threw this kunai at a very low point, because this kunai was almost directly lying on the ground. This showed that when Watergate threw this kunai, it was very likely that his body was in a relatively low position. Under what circumstances would a person be in a relatively low position? Sitting down? Or falling down? When thinking of this, Nangongji's heart became a little impatient. Although the relationship between Nangongji and Minato wasn't that close, and there were many conflicts between the two of them, both in the open and in the dark. But Watergate must not die here now. In this battle with Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate and Nangongji were not the main forces. Although Nangongji didn't know much, Nangongji was very clear that the relationship between Naruto and Watergate was actually closer than what they showed on the surface. Once Watergate had any problems, Naruto would directly lose control. The battle has never been about whose voice is louder, whose face is more ferocious. What can really bring victory is a calm heart and a concentrated spirit. Once Watergate had any problems, as a child of Watergate, Naruto would definitely directly lose his calmness in his heart. They were already at a disadvantage when facing Kagaya Otsutsuki. In terms of strength, they couldn't pose much of a threat to Kagaya Otsutsuki. The more they were at a disadvantage, the more they had to remain calm. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have room to resist and would be defeated directly. Nangongji almost broke out of his strength, moving towards the position where he judged Watergate to be. It didn't take long for Nangongji to directly see Watergate's iconic medium-length golden hair. At this moment, Watergate's body was covered with large and small wounds, lying face down on the ground. The wounds on Watergate's body were bleeding a lot due to the gravity, and scarlet blood flowed directly from Watergate's body to the ground. Although a ninja's physical fitness was far superior to ordinary people, it was more reflected in their recovery ability and strength. In terms of defensive ability and resistance to pressure, Nangongji, who had cultivated internal force and sword energy, was still inferior. Obviously, after entering this space, Watergate was also suppressed by the gravity. Watergate's body was covered with large and small wounds, and under the strong gravity he was bleeding a lot. Due to the large amount of blood loss, coupled with the huge pressure on his body due to the effect of gravity, Minato's body could only fall directly here, and the flying thunder god kunai in his hand was also directly thrown away. However, thanks to the kunai thrown out by Watergate, Nangongji might not have found Watergate. Now that he has seen Watergate, Nangongji naturally won't leave easily. Instead, he came to Watergate's side, ready to help Watergate deal with the large and small injuries. Chapter 7:16. Half squatting beside Watergate, Nangongji directly stretched out his hand and pulled out the large and small stones and wooden sticks that pierced Watergate's body one by one. After taking out the foreign objects that had pierced into the flesh, Nangongji immediately placed his palm that was imbued with internal force on the wound. Under the control of Nangongji, his internal force directly attached to the wound, directly stopping the blood from flowing out, and alleviating Watergate's bleeding situation. After taking out some bandages and medicine to treat Watergate's external injuries, Nangongji's expression didn't become relaxed, instead he became more serious. When treating Watergate's external injuries, Nangongji also checked Watergate's internal injuries to a certain extent. And the conclusion he got was not very optimistic. Because Minato's back had been hit by the rocks and trees, there was a large area of blood clot. His internal organs were also slightly damaged. For a ninja of Watergate's level, this kind of injury can be completely healed after a period of rest. But Watergate's injury wasn't treated well, and he directly entered the supergravity space where the pressure was far greater than the outside world. The strong pressure directly expanded Watergate's internal injuries to infinitely expand, and now it's even to the point where it's life-threatening. Even with his internal force, Nangongji didn't have a good way to heal Watergate's internal injuries. After all, Nangongji is a swordsman who focuses on fighting, and only has a little understanding of healing. It's really difficult for Nangongji to heal such a serious injury for Nangongji. Nangongji can only inject a large amount of his internal force into Watergate's body, and with the internal force he barely repaired Watergate's internal injuries temporarily. After circulating the internal force in Watergate's meridians 3 times, he directly controlled the internal force to rush into Watergate's brain. Originally he fell into a coma due to excessive blood loss, but Nangongji's internal force directly drilled into Watergate's brain, and woke up the brain that fell into a coma due to self-protection. Nangongji? Watergate slowly opened his eyes, and immediately found Nangongji beside him. Perhaps because he just woke up from a coma, Watergate didn't call Nangongji Chief Nangong, but directly called out Nangongji's name. However, Nangongja isn't a person who will stick to such trivial matters. After seeing that Watergate has woken up, Nangongja directly said to Watergate, "Sandame Hokage-sama, I believe that you should also be clear about the internal situation of your body. Now that your internal organs are basically broken and bleeding, I have already carried out emergency treatment for you, but after all, I am not a professional medical ninja, so my treatment can only temporarily prevent such injuries from worsening. The internal force used to repair your internal organs can only work for a limited period of time, and if your body suffers too much damage, it is not impossible for the internal force to be scattered. I don't know if you understand what I mean?" Although Nangongja didn't say it explicitly, his words were actually telling Watergate that the reason why Watergate can stay awake now is actually because Nangongja used his internal force as a glue to repair the damaged internal organs in Watergate's body, temporarily allowing various organs in Watergate's body to recover their functions. But this kind of glue is not permanent. Once it is hit to a certain extent, the internal force will directly collapse. The inevitable consequence of the collapse of the internal force is that the organs in his body that were barely glued together will immediately rupture or even suffer more serious injuries. Now in front of Watergate, Nangongja actually has two choices, either to directly hide in the corner of the battlefield to save his life, or to directly ignore the fact that he may die and directly fight with Otsutsuki Kagaya. In fact, this is a question that doesn't need to be asked to get the answer. Watergate has always been a person who puts his own interests before the interests of the public. Faced with the two choices provided by Nangongja, Watergate didn't think much and directly stood up with the help of Nangongja. At the moment when he stood up, Watergate directly made a hand seal to absorb the natural energy in the air to enter the Sage mode so that he can have the power to fight, but when Watergate began to release his spiritual force to draw the natural energy into his body, he suddenly found that the density of natural energy in this space is extremely close to zero. After releasing his spiritual force for a long time, Watergate didn't draw much natural energy into his body. He can only use part of the Senjutsu chakra that he barely condensed to directly wrap the organs in his body. With the help of the internal force to slowly repair the organs in his body, Watergate's complexion also looked a lot better. After a little sensing the situation in his body, Watergate said to Nangongja, "Now the injuries on my body have been slightly stabilized. Don't worry too much. As long as I am not directly hit by a powerful attack, there will be basically no problems. Maybe you don't know much about it, Nangongja, but the place we are in now is actually a huge space ninjutsu. That is to say, this space is actually artificially created. Before entering this space, I knew that several of us would definitely be separated. Naruto's body has my Flying Thunder God imprint, so don't worry too much, and before entering this space, I also desperately imprinted the Flying Thunder God imprint on Sasuke's body. And you and I happen to be in this space. As long as I use the Flying Thunder God jutsu, all four of us can be gathered together. Although this space ninjutsu is indeed very dangerous, I think that as long as the strength of the four of us can be gathered together, we will definitely be able to find a way to deal with these dangers." Watergate's words actually have no specific basis, just some personal inferences. Nangongja didn't like such words of encouragement, but one thing Watergate said was right, that is, gathering four people is definitely more effective than fighting alone. Chapter 717. Seeing that his plan was approved by Nangongja, Watergate closed his eyes and began to carefully explore the strength of this space. At the beginning, Watergate just spread his spiritual force inside the space. After a simple deduction, Watergate found that although it was difficult to perform a space jump in the supergravity space, Watergate could do it. But when Watergate fully spread his spiritual force, he found that there was no space coordinate for Naruto and Sasuke in this supergravity space. Seeing that it wasn't difficult to perform a space jump inside the space, Watergate also began to try to break through the space barrier with his spiritual force. But the moment his spiritual force touched the space barrier, Watergate's whole face became ugly. At the moment when his spiritual force touched the space barrier, Watergate already felt that his spiritual force was being swallowed by a large amount. Now is not the time to weaken his spiritual force, so Watergate immediately retracted his spiritual force after touching such a barrier. Nangong-sama, there seems to be something wrong with this space. Watergate looked at Nangongja with a bad expression, and said to Nangongja that his spiritual force was being swallowed after touching the space barrier. Nangongja also felt very troubled at the moment. After all, in the ninja world, Watergate can be said to be one of the most proficient ninja in space ninjutsu, but even such an existence still thinks that the current situation is very tricky, which made Nangongja quite a bit unprepared. There is a barrier that can swallow spiritual force? If there is no way to use spiritual force, then the Flying Thunder God Jutsu can't be used. This is really... Yandame-sama, I know that you have an extremely deep understanding of space ninjutsu, but I don't know how we can leave this space and find Naruto and Sasuke. Hearing Nangongja's question, Watergate also began to think carefully. After all, whether it is Watergate or Nangongja, both of them are people who dare to face challenges. Although such a problem is tricky, they can always find a solution. This is the confidence of Watergate and Nangongja as strong people. Although this spiritual barrier is very strong, it's not impossible for me to break through it if I don't care about the consumption. At that time, what we need to face now is not only this space barrier, but also a powerful existence that can overturn the ninja world at any time after breaking through the space barrier. Based on my observations, I believe that although this barrier has an extremely powerful effect on mental strength, it shouldn't be able to exert such a powerful effect on pure physical attacks. Moreover, in the ninja world, most of the barriers directly target energy like chakra. Nangong's internal force and sword chi are completely different from chakra. Once you can directly attack the space barrier, I believe that it will be able to greatly weaken the space barrier, and even drill a small hole in the space barrier, allowing us to directly leave this space. Watergate's words are indeed very reasonable. After all, internal force cultivators have been declining in the ninja world for many years, and even in the era when internal force cultivators were prosperous, there were very few people who could cultivate sword chi. How can there be a barrier in the ninja world that can specifically target the internal force and sword chi used by Nangongja? Directly attack the space barrier? Although I did rely on the cooperation of natural chakra and Heaven's retribution sword to directly open a space channel, my own attainments and understanding of space are not that profound. In this space, I think Fourth Hokage can clearly feel that there is very little natural chakra in this space. I really don't have any means to directly penetrate the space barrier and directly attack the space barrier. Nangongja has never been a stubborn person. In fact, Nangongja can directly face what he knows and what he doesn't know. No one is perfect, and naturally, there is no such thing as an omnipotent person. If you have a weakness, you should face it well instead of trying to cover it up. About this, I actually thought about it. Looking at Nangongja, Watergate seemed to have found a solution without thinking. Of course, Watergate has a very comprehensive understanding of Nangongja. In the beginning, Nangongja lived in Woodleaf Village for a long time. Even if Nangongja didn't do anything to harm the interests of the village, as the leader of Woodleaf Village, Watergate will naturally do a thorough investigation. Nangongja has been active in the ninja world as a Woodleaf Village ninja for a long time. Naturally, Woodleaf Village has a very deep understanding of Nangongja's personal temperament. After that, although Nangongja's whereabouts are mysterious, basically every time Nangongja makes a move, there will be a Woodleaf Village ninja around Nangongja, so some of Nangongja's moves are also recorded by Woodleaf Village ninja. Woodleaf Village's comprehensive evaluation of Nangongja is a strong person with internal force and sword energy, unparalleled in close range, difficult to defeat in medium range, and has the possibility of self-defense in long range. And Watergate, as a ninja proficient in spatial ninjutsu, naturally conducted a certain degree of investigation on Nangongja's mysterious whereabouts. Watergate found that to maintain such a fast movement, only a space-type ability can support it. So after a series of investigations, Watergate discovered that Nangongja seems to have the ability to open a space channel from clues. After all, now is the time for a joint battle. Nangongja is not ready to directly fall out with Watergate. His spatial ability has too many loopholes, so Nangongja deliberately exaggerated one of his weaknesses to gain Watergate's trust, or to let Watergate feel at ease and said it to Watergate. A really good lie is never a pure lie. The best lie is half true and half false, or even 90% true and 10% false. Because even 90% of the truth is far less dangerous than a 10% lie that can be covered up and distorted. Is Nangongja's space jump really that big of a limitation? If Watergate really believes it, then Watergate is a real fool. Even if he and Nangongja do cooperate to do something, but really, in the ninja world, how can there be eternal enemies or eternal friends that don't belong to the same force? Chapter 7:18. Nangongja's concealment was naturally done seamlessly, and Watergate's suspicions would not dissipate because of Nangongja's perfect concealment. Standing from different perspectives, the problems they think about are naturally different. Naruto and Sasuke, as ninja who obeyed Woodleaf Village and ninja who worked for Blood Cloak Pavilion, can cooperate in the face of a common enemy at this moment. However, Nangongja and Watergate are respectively the head of Blood Cloak Pavilion and the fourth Hokage of Woodleaf Village. But since they have reached such a position, whether it is Watergate or Nangongzhe, they will not shirk the responsibility brought by their identity. Although Nangongzhe and Watergate have their own considerations, it has to be said that the two of them have a common enemy in Otsutsuki Kagaya, so Nangongzhe and Watergate can only temporarily postpone some of their plans under great pressure. Everything must be put after defeating Otsutsuki Kagaya. Nangongzhe and Watergate have reached a tacit consensus in their hearts at this moment. After all, in the face of such a peerless powerhouse like Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate and Nangongzhe must not have the slightest slack or distraction. Otherwise, the ninja world will be destroyed by Otsutsuki Kagaya. What can Nangongzhe and Watergate's plans count as? Nangonghead, I have also considered what you said. After all, space is really a mysterious and difficult thing to understand. Even if I have studied it for many years, I dare not say that I really know much about space. What I can touch is only a little bit of the real power of space. Minato didn't lie because time and space were too mysterious and difficult to detect existences. We can still touch elements of nature like metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and thunder with our own hands and use our own eyes to perceive them. But how can we perceive things like time and space, which are close to concepts? In what way? Even if we know that we are affected by time and space all the time, time and space are still in existence that we can't touch, and we can't even describe with words. Although I've only scratched the surface, I've found a lot of techniques that aren't that powerful but are very useful in the application of space. Actually, it's not as difficult to let Nangonghead's sword chi directly attack the space barrier as we thought. Just now, the barrier did indeed absorb my mental strength, but I can clearly feel that after my mental strength entered the barrier, it wasn't immediately devoured. Instead, it seemed to be stored. Because of this, I have now roughly figured out the spatial location of the space barrier. With this data, I can directly inscribe a rune on your weapon that can attack the space barrier. As long as the runes still exist, then Nangong, your attacks will be able to directly affect the space barrier. With your powerful inner strength and sword chi, you will definitely be able to find a path to victory for us. Although Watergate's description wasn't very detailed, the more Nangongzhe listened, the more he felt that Watergate's understanding of space was definitely not as simple as superficial. As long as he could figure out the spatial coordinates, he could directly ignore the distance between spaces and directly transfer the attack to the space barrier between spaces. But he only relied on inscribing runes? If this kind of ability is considered superficial, then what are the other ninjutsu that are labeled as powerful? Nangongzhe naturally cherished his god's disaster sword very much. Watergate's so-called inscribing of Nangongzhe wasn't sure if it would directly damage the sword. Nangongzhe had always believed that the god's disaster sword had its own sword soul. If he wanted his sword to be truly sharp, the first thing he had to do was to respect his sword, and then respect his own dignity as a swordsman. Therefore, Nangongzhe directly opened his hand. Sword chi and internal strength continuously condensed in his palm. A small sword about 3 inches long and 2 fingers wide formed by interweaving sword chi and internal strength directly floated in Nangongzhe's hand. Void sword condensation. This was an ability that Nangongzhe had never displayed before. However, after seeing Nangongzhe's floating small sword appear in his hand, Watergate had already thought of many possible applications of this ability in his mind. Woodleaf's original evaluation of Nangongzhe was that Nangongzhe's own long-range attacks weren't as threatening as his close-range attacks. However, this small sword floating in Nangongzhe's hand could clearly be controlled by Nangongzhe from a distance. Since Nangongzhe could control one sword without any burden, then what would happen if Nangongzhe could control 2, 3, 10, or even 100 swords? The subtle competition between Watergate and Nangongzhe was constantly revealing the trump cards that they had deliberately left behind. However, no matter if it was Nangongzhe or Watergate, they didn't have a trace of regret in their hearts. After all, a war might really break out between the two of them in the future. Since that was the case, they had to leave a shadow in each other's heart and let each other know how difficult it was to deal with them. Only a fool would pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger because the consequences of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger might really be that of a pig. Therefore, Watergate and Nangongzhe's choice was to win the psychological war even if they had to reveal their trump cards. This was the best strategy in war. Of course I can do that. Although Watergate was shocked, he was still able to perfectly control his expression. At this moment, whether it was Watergate's eyes or his expression, he had a gentle attitude, even though Watergate's heart had become extremely cold. Nangongzhe looked at Watergate. Although he couldn't see anything from his face and eyes, Nangongzhe was very clear that Watergate's heart couldn't be so calm at this moment. He stretched out his hand and handed the small sword that was condensed from his internal strength and sword chi to Watergate. Watergate directly stretched out his finger and gently placed it on the blade of the small sword. His finger seemed to tremble slightly, and the sharp sword chi on the small sword directly cut a thin wound on Watergate's finger. The wound wasn't very big, but blood constantly flowed out from it. Watergate didn't care about the deep wound on his hand. Instead, he directly injected his chakra into his blood. Then, on the small sword in Nangongji's hand, he wrote a rune that was similar to the Flying Thunder God's kunai, but more complicated. Chapter 719. Although the runes were cumbersome, Watergate himself had deep attainments in spatial runes and sealing techniques, so Watergate engraved them very quickly. The blood-containing chakra was directly engraved by Watergate on the small sword in Nangongji's hand, and the piercing chill emitted from the small sword made Watergate more serious. His fingertips danced, and finally Watergate made the last stroke. When the last rune was completed by Watergate, all the runes engraved by Watergate's blood began to surge. The runes influenced and cooperated with each other, and the mysterious and unpredictable spatial aura was directly transmitted from this small sword. After several changes in their combination, all of the runes suddenly emitted a dazzling red light, and then directly melted into the small sword. A trace of blood-colored silk directly appeared in the small sword. The original azure small sword and the scarlet silk that filled the inside of the small sword at this moment formed a strange and unique beauty. Chief Nangong, I have already transmitted the spatial coordinates into this sword. However, the spatial coordinates may not be that accurate, so I hope that you can expand your attack range as much as possible. At the same time, you have to ensure the strength of your attack. After all, Watergate only relied on his own psychic power that had not dissipated to determine the specific location of the spatial barrier, but what kind of state the spatial barrier was, whether it was Watergate or Nangongji, they actually didn't know, so what Nangongji and Watergate could do was to expand the attack range as much as possible to ensure that they could really hit the spatial barrier. I understand. Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongji also quickly understood the meaning of Watergate. Although he and Watergate had more or less some disputes, the priority now was to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya, otherwise, everything would be impossible. Nangongji slightly lifted the small sword in his hand, and the other hand made a sword finger, and the fingertips were facing the small sword in his hand. A trace of small sword energy directly gushed out from Nangongji's fingertips. In order not to destroy the runes engraved by Watergate on the small sword, Nangongji did not let the sword energy directly supplement the small sword, but directly let the sword energy surround the small sword. The small sword energy was too thin, so it looked a bit bright white. Just like 100 birds paying homage to a phoenix, the small sword that was condensed from sword chi and inner strength seemed to be filled with a kind of attraction to the small sword chi. The sword chi lingered on the small sword, adding a beautiful bright white ribbon to the small sword. Nangongji nodded to Watergate as if to tell Watergate that he was ready. For Nangongji's means, Watergate didn't understand it very well, but the dangerous aura from the small sword and the white ribbon was real. Watergate could clearly feel how dangerous the small sword and the bright white ribbon were. If it really had a strong power as strong as his perception, it was not impossible to drill a hole in the spatial barrier. Go! Nangongji gently lifted the small sword in his hand and wrapped his inner strength around the small sword. He pointed his sword forward and the small sword was propelled forward by his inner strength. Even in the supergravity space, the increased gravity did not affect the flying speed of the small sword at all. The small sword flew faster and faster in the air, and the rune that Watergate carved with his own blood in the small sword seemed to be affected by the speed. The red light became more and more dazzling. When the red light reached its peak, it directly covered the entire small sword. With a flash of light, the small sword completely disappeared from the space. Although he couldn't see where the small sword flew to, Nangongji could still rely on the connection between him and the small sword to sense that the small sword was being guided by the blood mark in his body to a place quickly. After the small sword was no longer bound by the supergravity space, it seemed to have become faster. In just a moment, Nangongji could clearly sense that the small sword was infinitely close to the target. As the small sword flew slower and slower, Nangongji finally reached the peak of this feeling, and the feeling in his heart became stronger and stronger. Nangongji directly formed a hand seal that was different from the ninjutsu hand seals in front of his chest, and softly shouted, "Explode!" Although he didn't know how far away the small sword was, the moment Nangongji issued his command, the sword energy and internal force inside the small sword began to attack each other. The internal force was neutral and peaceful, while the sword energy was sharp and overbearing. These two things were very different in nature. When Nangongzhi was in his body, Nangongzhi could rely on his own spiritual force to maintain the balance between the two, and even make them promote each other. But once Nangongzhi completely withdrew his spiritual force and deliberately broke the balance between the two, the sword energy and internal force began to attack each other. A large amount of energy collided with each other, and the power caused by such a collision was difficult to estimate. Finally, the bright white ribbon condensed by Nangongzhi's small sword energy dispersed again at this moment, turning back into small sword energy. These sword energy continued to divide into shorter and denser sword energy. Chapter 720. It wasn't only Nangongzhi who was paying attention to the changes inside the space, but Watergate was also paying attention to the place where his psychic force was left behind. Nangongzhi controlled his sword to attack the place where his psychic force was left behind, and Watergate was naturally able to observe the changes in the space barrier through this psychic force. Watergate could clearly feel that the space barrier was getting thinner and thinner, and the powerful impact was constantly weakening the space barrier. Even Watergate's psychic force that was restrained by the space barrier seemed to have some room to move. Now is the time. Just when Nangongzhi was constantly urging his sword to burst out more power, Watergate suddenly put his hand on Nangongzhi's shoulder, and a large amount of chakra surged in his body, directly wrapping himself and Nangongzhi in a chakra barrier. Nangongzhi and Watergate's figure flashed, and directly appeared in the dark space gap where Nangongzhi was temporarily sucked into the defense of heaven. A somewhat transparent crimson crystal barrier directly appeared in the sight of Nangongzhi and Watergate. At this moment, it was obvious that a part of the crimson crystal barrier had very deep cracks, and compared to the other parts of the barrier, it was obvious that a part of the barrier was caved in. Watergate and Nangongzhi were now in front of this hole. "Is this the space barrier you mentioned, fourth Hokage?" Nangongzhi looked at the crimson crystal barrier and asked Watergate, who was standing beside him. Watergate's eyes were also filled with a faint blurriness at this moment. As a ninja proficient in space ninjutsu, the space gap and the space barrier in front of him at this moment were too attractive for Watergate. If he had enough time, he would definitely be able to study a lot of precious knowledge that he had never touched before. But unfortunately, Watergate didn't have enough time. With a little disappointment in his eyes, Watergate said to Nangongzhi, "Yes, this is the space barrier we need to break. When we were in the gravity space before, this space barrier was very intact, so I couldn't directly move the two of us directly into such a space gap. But thanks to your attack, Nangongzhi, a gap appeared in such a space barrier, so I can directly come into this space gap to observe the situation of the space barrier at close range, and then make the corresponding strategy." After getting Watergate's confirmation, Nangongzhi looked at the broken space barrier and said to Watergate, "What do you want me to do now, attack again to break this space barrier?" Watergate heard Nangongzhi's question, shook his head and said to Nangongzhi, "Nangongzhi, please don't be impatient. With the strength of you and me, although it is quite difficult to break such a space barrier, it is naturally possible to do it together. But what we are facing now is not a space barrier that is natural. This space barrier is built by our enemy Kaguya Otsutsuki. Once we really break the space barrier so simply and violently, then Kaguya Otsutsuki is likely to be able to sense what is happening here and make preparations in advance. At that time, we will inevitably fall into a passive position, but if we think about it in reverse, we may be able to directly penetrate such a space barrier in a more secretive way and then enter the core of this space, then we will be the ones with the advantage." Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongzhi also understood Watergate's plan. After all, Kaguya Otsutsuki is more powerful than the four of them combined. If you want to win against the strong, the most important principles to abide by are to be bold, careful, and hide your true intentions and even your own existence as much as possible under any circumstances. In that case, I have a general idea. Since he agreed with Watergate's plan, Nangongzhi naturally began to think about how to break through such a space barrier. Nangongzhi's eyes swept through some cracks that still have sword chi and internal force raging. Suddenly, his eyes moved and he said to Watergate, "Through what happened just now, we have been able to find that such a space barrier has a very high resistance to chakra and mental power, but it doesn't have much defensive ability against the sword chi and internal force that I can mobilize. We can directly wrap ourselves in internal force like now, and use the sword chi as a drill to directly attack the weak part of the space barrier. In this way we have a high possibility of directly penetrating such a space barrier." What Nangongzhi can see, Watergate can naturally see. Therefore, Nangongzhi is very clear in his heart that Watergate wants him to stand up and take on the task of breaking through the space barrier. Breaking through the space barrier will naturally greatly weaken Nangongzhi's internal force and sword chi. This is also Watergate's insurance for himself, an insurance that Nangongzhi can't refuse. This was a blatant conspiracy. We need to break through the space barrier, and the only person who can break through the space barrier is you. After breaking through the space barrier, you will have to consume a lot of energy. Your consumption is a very good thing for me. For the future of the shinobi world and your own ambitions, you have to become a knife in my hand and be my vanguard. Watergate's move can be said to have completely pushed himself to the position of initiative, and in order to not have the slightest chance of being criticized, Nangongzhi directly opened his mouth and directly took on such an action that won't have much benefit and will even bring some harm to himself. Just like what he said before, Nangongzhi had no reason to refuse. Chapter 721. Although Watergate did put some effort into this matter, there is no way for him to avoid it. After all, Nangongzhi still has his own responsibilities and obligations behind him, pushing him to fight against a powerful existence like Kagaya. Nangongzhi's body constantly rushed out of his body, and the Kenki constantly converged on the tip of the drill that Nangongzhi just created. With the continuous integration of the Kenki, the drill also became harder and sharper. Fourth Hokage, get ready, I'm going to go directly. After Nangongzhi reminded Watergate, he didn't wait for Watergate's response and directly urged the internal energy in his body. The sphere that was formed by internal energy, including Nangongzhi and Watergate, also began to rush in the direction of the crimson crystal wall under Nangongzhi's control. Although Nangongzhi didn't give Watergate enough time to adjust his body after reminding him, but after all, Watergate is also a powerful existence who stands at the peak of the ninja world, and even has one foot in the peak of the ninja world. Such a simple operation like stabilizing his body is completely possible for him. After attaching chakra to the soles of his feet, Watergate adjusted his body a little, and directly stood in the sphere of internal energy like Nangongzhi. No matter how the sphere accelerated and rotated, Watergate still remained motionless. Soon, Nangongzhi used his internal energy and Kenki to create a drill directly connected with the crimson crystal wall. Under Nangongzhi's control, the sharp drill condensed by Kenki directly pierced into Nangongzhi's largest and deepest crack. After the drill completely penetrated into the crack, the Kenki that originally looked like a drill also began to rotate under Nangongzhi's control. In the process of rotating, the Kenki began to rush out of the drill's shackles and began to cut the crimson crystal wall around it. At first, it was a difficult task for the small Kenki to cooperate with the drill to cut the crystal wall. But soon Nangongzhi seemed to have found a way. The angle of the Kenki cutting the crystal wall was no longer straight, but with a slight curve. The crystal wall itself was transparent, but Nangongzhi seemed to have discovered the texture contained in the transparent crystal wall, and with a very small amount of Kenki, he could directly cut the hard crystal wall. However, this huge crimson crystal wall was located in a space crack after all. In the past, when Nangongzhi was looking for the Lion Clan's alternate space, he had drifted through a space crack. Even now, Nangongzhi's heart was filled with lingering fear when he recalled the danger at that time. The current Nangongzhi was naturally much stronger than before, but in the face of an existence like the realm that was beyond the understanding and touch of ordinary humans, Nangongzhi's heart was filled with an indescribable awe. Humans were often the most courageous when they were at their most ignorant. This was because ignorance would make people unable to perceive the dangers hidden in the things they faced. Since they couldn't see the dangers, they naturally wouldn't become afraid. But when a person's cognition became richer and richer, and they were able to observe the things they faced from all angles, the irresistible fear or awe would directly devour the courage hidden in their hearts. Nangongzhi was naturally the same. After so many years of ups and downs in the shinobi world, Nangongzhi was down and out, Nangongzhi was glorious, and now Nangongzhi was in control of a force that couldn't be ignored in the shinobi world, the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and became an existence that even the 5 great shinobi villages of the shinobi world had to face. At this moment, Nangongzhi was once again facing the space crack that he once wandered through. The awe in his heart was even more intense. This was also why Nangongzhi was so careful to control his Kenki and internal force so that he could complete what he needed to do with the least consumption. The space crack wasn't a playground for children. As long as there was a negligence, it was likely to lead to extremely serious consequences. Nangongzhi and Watergate weren't afraid of death, but their own death would cause chaos to an organization, a force, a country, and even the shinobi world. Such consequences naturally made Watergate and Nangongja have to be very careful and cautious. The crimson crystal wall was penetrated little by little. Finally, with a crisp sound, Nangongja drilled a small gap in the crimson crystal wall. On the opposite side of the gap was a black space crack that was also shrouded in darkness, but Watergate's face showed a little joy. This must be the core of the so-called space-time ninjutsu Heaven's Defense that Otsutsuki Kagaya mentioned. Although this space crack is similar to the previous one, it contains a larger space force. As long as this space force is used, it can easily complete the jump between spaces. And here, I can clearly sense the mark of Flying Thunder God that I deliberately left on Naruto and Sasuke. Gently closing his eyes, Watergate directly unfolded his spiritual force and carefully observed the space crack around him. Using his spiritual force to capture a part of the space energy, Watergate's hands began to quickly form hand seals. Usually, when Watergate used the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, if it was a short distance, he didn't need to form hand seals at all. If it was some advanced ninjutsu that was extended from the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, he would need to form hand seals 2 or 3 times to guide the chakra. But this time, Watergate's hands were constantly forming hand seals. According to Nangongja's statistics, Watergate formed at least 20 hand seals in this very short time, and most of them were not conventional hand seals used to perform ninjutsu. Nangongja wasn't a ninja who practiced chakra and performed ninjutsu in the conventional sense. Although Nangongja was very clear about the common sense of ninja, he wasn't a ninja after all, so he didn't have the ability to judge the nature of a ninjutsu from the combination of ninja hand seals and non-conventional hand seals. But the more hand seals, the longer the preparation time, the more powerful a ninjutsu can be. Now that Watergate had prepared a ninjutsu for such a long time, naturally, it wouldn't be a bad product. Chapter 722. Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Finally, after preparing for a long time, Watergate ended his fingers flying up and down, and the name of the ninjutsu that he had been brewing for a long time was also said by Watergate. It's just one more word than the Flying Thunder God Jutsu that Watergate has always used, but the extra word has extraordinary significance. The principle of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu is that the caster directly transfers his body to the location set by himself through the relevant theory of space jump. Later, after a series of improvements, Watergate developed the Flying Thunder God Guide, which is a way to set up a barrier on the Flying Thunder God Kunai, and then wrap the energy in it to transfer it. But the Flying Thunder God Guide can only transfer energy, and the location of the transfer can't be too far away, otherwise the transfer is likely to fail. In other words, in fact, the Flying Thunder God Guide is an incomplete version of the reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu that Watergate is using now. Being able to transfer objects with the Flying Thunder God mark for his own use is an important stage goal that Watergate has set for his own research on the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Now Watergate is in the space gap. Although it is very dangerous, it is also the position closest to the origin of space. A large amount of space energy is restrained by Watergate, and Watergate also began to try to display the reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu that he has been studying for a long time. The reason why Watergate constantly seals at a very fast speed is in fact that Watergate is constantly modifying the values and parameters of his ninjutsu through the seals to adjust his ninjutsu. After thinking that his various parameters and values are completely ready, Watergate said the name of his ninjutsu and injected a large amount of his chakra into his hands to activate the ninjutsu. The brilliant blue and white light instantly covered both of Watergate's hands. Watergate suddenly put his hands together, and then slowly opened his palms wrapped in the blue and white light. Although Watergate's palms were slowly opened, the blue and white light that shrouded Watergate's hands gradually separated from Watergate's palms, and slowly condensed into a small and solid ball of light in the place where Watergate's 2 palms were opened. Watergate's forehead and cheeks were wet with sweat at the moment, and even his half-long golden hair was stuck to his cheeks at the moment. Watergate's chakra and physical strength are now consumed, but Watergate has no choice but to continue. From the situation of Watergate and Nangongja passing through the space barrier together, Kagaya is obviously on guard against this kind of behavior that wants to directly travel through space. Come back. Watergate whispered softly, and it didn't sound like a voice full of confidence when using ninjutsu. Instead, it sounded like a prayer in his tone. Now Watergate is actually gambling that his first reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu will succeed, gambling that Naruto and Sasuke can gather by his side, gambling that his dangerous move will make Black Zetsu and Otsutsuki Kagaya have no way to detect his plan, and then give them a chance to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya. This was a huge gamble, a gamble that the Watergate was quietly implicated in his heart, a gamble that smashed everything on the balance. Chapter 723. The space kunai, which was inserted by Watergate in the void, suddenly burst into a blue-white light. In such a blue-white light, there was also a colorless but seemingly full of the purest space energy. This space energy was naturally the space energy that Watergate forcibly restrained from the space gap of Heaven's defense, by relying on his psychic power. This space energy was also an important safeguard for Watergate to be able to perform reverse flying thunder god jutsu. The space energy was divided into two during the movement process. Under the control of Watergate, the two space energy reformed into spherical energy suspended in the air. These two spherical space energy were the space coordinates and insurance measures set by Watergate for Naruto and Sasuke's return. When performing a space jump, especially a reverse space jump, although the human body was only in the space gap for a very short time, every time the space jump was opened and the space jump was released, the human body would be under extreme pressure. Watergate and Nangongja had been in contact with space energy several times, and their chakra and internal force were also very strong, so they could stay in the space gap for a long time like this. However, Sasuke and Naruto were different. Although these two children became very powerful for various reasons, the strength of their abilities did not mean that their vision, insight, and adaptability were equally strong. The reverse flying thunder god jutsu that Watergate was now performing could only be regarded as an unfinished product. In order to ensure the safety of Naruto and Sasuke, Watergate naturally had to allocate more power to protect the safety of Naruto and Watergate. The small sphere formed by space energy began to emit small light spots at this moment and merged into the surrounding dark void. All the energy finally condensed to the highest level at this moment, and the space energy sphere was also completely integrated into the unknown void at this moment. Two lights flashed, and the figures of Naruto and Sasuke appeared directly at the original location of the space energy sphere. The blue-white space kunai that was originally inserted into the void by Watergate also dissipated at this moment. Watergate forcibly suppressed his physical fatigue and raised his head to look at Naruto and Sasuke, who he summoned using the reverse flying thunder god jutsu. Naruto's condition was good. Although there was still a little green corrosive liquid on his body and he looked a little tired, overall he still maintained his combat power at a considerable level. At this moment, Sasuke closed his eyes tightly, as if he was comprehending something. Sasuke just wanted to say something, but when his mouth opened slightly, Nangongja directly unsheathed the sword in his hand and said to Sasuke, "Although you and Naruto are the main forces against Otsutsuki Kagaya, I won't let the two of you charge in front while I watch from the sidelines. As your sensei, I will do my best to pave the way for you. Otherwise, the sword in my hand will laugh at me." Hearing Nangongja's words, Sasuke abruptly swallowed some of the words he just wanted to say to prove his determination. His sensei is still his sensei. Even though Nangongja's character has more or less changed over the years, Nangongja's unbending kendo will always be the backbone of Nangongja's body. Chapter 724. After exchanging a few words with each other, Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja also began to seize the time to restore the energy in their bodies and nourish their spirit. After all, the experience just now has more or less affected the state of the four of them. For the upcoming battle, they must seize every minute and second to maintain their best state. But whether it's Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, they know very well that it's impossible for them to get enough time to recover. Although the four of them were not directly attacked by Kagaya when they entered Heaven's defense, it doesn't mean that Kagaya really thinks that they can rest easy after entering Heaven's defense. Even if Kagaya thinks so, as someone who has been in the shinobi world for many years, he knows the truth that a lion needs to go all out to catch a rabbit. He will definitely pay more attention to the four of them again and again. And once Kagaya finds that the four of them are no longer in the space he arranged for the four of them, it's time for the final battle. In the core of the 6 dimensions of Heaven's defense, the origin sphere, Kagaya was suspended in the center of the space. His long silver-gray hair fell directly to a position lower than the soles of his feet. Although the wide robe on his body covered his body, it also brought endless holiness to Kagaya. A large number of pure chakra constantly appeared in the beginning sphere. This chakra that was absorbed by the sacred tree from the ninjas was all absorbed by Kagaya's body to supplement the missing energy in his body. When Kagaya felt that the energy in his body was infinitely close to saturation, he finally opened his eyes slowly. The milky white pupils were located in the center of his white eyeballs. They were a little strange eyes, but on Kagaya's face, they looked so harmonious. Zetsu, during the time I was absorbing energy, did anything happen? Although the sacred tree fruit affected Kagaya's mind to a certain extent, Kagaya, known as the goddess of Uno, was never a stupid existence. As soon as she woke up, Kagaya began to ask Black Zetsu, who was hiding in his sleeve, about everything that happened during her sleep. Black Zetsu himself is the life evolved from Kagaya's spiritual power, the so-called third sun. Therefore, for Otsutsuki Kagaya, Black Zetsu can be said to be completely dedicated. In the past thousands of years, Black Zetsu may have been a subordinate of different people, but his loyalty will always be left to his mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya. Reporting to Mother. Nangongjir and Namikaze Watergate met in the supergravity space. Under the joint efforts of the two, they penetrated the space barrier, and Namikaze Watergate used the space energy in the space gap to cast a ninjutsu that seems to have the opposite effect of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. He directly pulled Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke out of the acid space and the ice space. Now all four of them are staying in the space gap. It seems that they want to use this short time to restore their strength. After hearing Otsutsuki Kagaya's question, Black Zetsu directly told everything he knew to his mother Otsutsuki Kagaya. If Nangongjir or Namikaze Watergate were present, after hearing Black Zetsu's words, they will immediately be stunned, because Black Zetsu's understanding of the situation is too detailed, and it is very likely that even the conversation between them has been heard by Black Zetsu. In fact, such a strange ability is attributed to Black Zetsu's psychic power. Psychic power is invisible, but it has a complete body because of the power of six paths and yin-yang release. Such a situation can almost be said to be a miracle. It is precisely because his essence is psychic power, so when Kagaya entered the origin space and began to absorb a lot of chakra, Black Zetsu also absorbed a part of the chakra. However, when absorbing this chakra, Black Zetsu did not directly store this chakra in his body. Instead, he returned this chakra back to the origin space. A large number of chakra, after being processed by Black Zetsu, spread across the 6 major spaces through the connection between the various spaces. In the beginning, the amount of chakra processed by Black Zetsu was still too little, so only a small area could be detected. However, in order to protect the organs in his body, Watergate absorbed a lot of natural energy in the space. This natural energy is naturally mixed with the pure energy that has been processed by Black Zetsu's chakra. This energy is Black Zetsu's eyes and ears. The energy lurking in Watergate's body can't directly cause any threat to Watergate, but it is enough to grasp Watergate's personal movements. This is the reason why Black Zetsu can get all the information about Nangongjir's group so easily. After hearing the information stated by Black Zetsu, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't have the slightest worry in his eyes. He was still like a god. His eyes were full of indifference. Is that so? It seems that Hagoromo's 2 children are not bad, but it's not enough. Since they are children, they should act like a spoiled child. If they go too far, it's natural for me to teach them what is right and what is wrong. As for that Nangongjir and Namikaze Minato, these 2 people are really too noisy. Is it because of these 2 people that my 2 grandsons have such a bad attitude towards me, their grandmother? Naruto and Sasuke themselves are the 2 children of Rikudo Sennin, Otsutsuki Azura and Otsutsuki Indra's chakra reincarnation. For Kagaya, Naruto and Sasuke are his own grandchildren. Seeing his 2 grandchildren actually disobeying him like this, Kagaya's mind couldn't help but think of his 2 children, Hagoromo and Himura, joining hands to deal with him and seal him. His originally calm eyes were full of a violent mood at this moment. Chapter 725. Otsutsuki Kagaya is a mother, and a mother with a twisted and extremely possessive personality. When Otsutsuki Kagaya swallowed the chakra fruit, she didn't know whether it was because of the chakra fruit or because of the sudden surge in her strength. Otsutsuki Kagaya's character was greatly distorted. For such a twisted and possessive mother, the biggest pain in her heart was that her 2 children betrayed her and sealed themselves away. However, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't have any hatred for her 2 children. On the contrary, Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was still full of deep love for her 2 children, but this love was very twisted. She wanted to tame her 2 children and even take them as her own. Now her 2 children obviously no longer exist in this world, but the faint breath from Sasuke and Naruto still made Otsutsuki Kagaya involuntarily regard them as her own children. And perhaps it's because Naruto and Sasuke are not Hagoromo and Himura, so Otsutsuki Kagaya's hope in her heart is even greater. As long as she can get proof from 2 people like Naruto and Sasuke that she is not an unqualified mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya can also untie a knot in her heart. Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongja are all trying their best to restore their energy in the space gap, and try to rest their spirits as much as possible. But all of a sudden, all four of them opened their eyes. The reason why Watergate and Nangongja opened their eyes was that there was a malice that couldn't be ignored at all, which made Nangongja and Watergate shudder. As for Naruto and Sasuke, they also felt a pair of eyes watching them. Although there was a weak malice, most of it was a strong desire that was difficult to suppress, a strong desire to completely occupy something. It's coming. Although the four of them felt different gazes, all of them had an instinctive vigilance in their hearts. It was as if they had already sensed in advance that something beyond their control was about to happen, or even was happening right beside them. Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongja, the four of them, after all, are the strongest in the world, so after such a kind of vigilance appeared in their hearts, they immediately prepared to disperse to face different dangers and different situations. However, the reactions of Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongja were still a little bit inferior. Suddenly, a huge black hole appeared in the void under the four people's feet, like a piece of paper being peeled off, and a strong suction force appeared from the hole, which directly pulled all four people's jutsu. Naruto's jutsu, shuttling between the six worlds. Otsutsuki Kagaya just waved his hand in the beginning space. Naruto's jutsu directly formed four space caves under the feet of Nangongja and the other three people, and directly absorbed all four of them. After passing through the space tunnel formed by Naruto's jutsu, Nangongja and the other three were all transmitted to the beginning space, where Otsutsuki Kagaya was. The barrier formed by the internal force and space energy, which were originally used to keep them safe in the space crack, now became the best defensive measure to offset the impact of the four people. The four figures fell directly from the sky and smashed on the ground, splashing a lot of dust. Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes looked at the smoke and dust in the sky with a little bit of disgust. Otsutsuki Kagaya gently waved the slightly wide sleeves on his clothes, and a strong wind rushed out directly from the sleeves. After the strong wind rushed out of the sleeves came into contact with the air, the wind became stronger and stronger, and the dust in the sky was directly wiped clean like graffiti on a blackboard. Without the smoke to block his sight, Otsutsuki Kagaya also saw the four huge pits on the ground due to the fall from a high altitude. But at this moment, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, all four figures disappeared. What's the point of a mere ant playing such a small trick? Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't feel any anger after seeing Nangongja's group disappear. Instead, he seemed to be laughing at Nangongja's behavior of ants jumping up and down in front of him. Otsutsuki Kagaya closed his eyes slightly, and his hands made a cross-shaped seal, and a large amount of chakra gathered. Byakugan open. That's right, Otsutsuki Kagaya's milky white eyes aren't any other dojutsu, but it's one of the three dojutsu that has a relatively low presence compared to the Rinnegan and Sharingan in the shinobi world, but it's one of the three dojutsu that has a large number of people, Byakugan. The Hyuga clan is not the descendant of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, but the descendant of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the younger brother of Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Hagoromo Otsutsuki inherited the sage's body and the Rinnegan on Otsutsuki Kagaya's forehead, and Otsutsuki Himura inherited the Byakugan in Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes. Although the Hyuga clan's Byakugan seems to be far more useful for reconnaissance than combat, at this moment, the Byakugan in Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes completely surpasses the existence of Byakugan in the ordinary sense. At the same time, Otsutsuki Kagaya's Byakugan also has an extremely powerful offensive power. Through perfect Byakugan detection, Otsutsuki Kagaya has found Sasuke and Naruto behind him, and on his left and right sides, Watergate and Nangongja each occupied one side, ready to fight with him. With a slight smile on his face, Otsutsuki Kagaya stood on the ground from a suspended state and whispered softly, "It's really a simple trick. Pincer attack left and right to create opportunities for the rear." Naruto and Sasuke's Hagoromo's six-path yang and six-path yin power are indeed dangerous for me, but you two ordinary mortals, do you really think you have the ability to entangle me and create opportunities for Azura and Indra? Chapter 726. Kagaya's voice was getting louder and louder. Originally it was just a whisper, but now it resounded throughout the origin sphere. Watergate and Nangongja naturally wouldn't do nothing. After seeing that Kagaya had activated Byakugan, Watergate and Nangongja had already rushed out of their hiding positions at the same time. Byakugan itself is the insight eye, clairvoyance eye. Any concealment ability will be useless in front of Byakugan. Moreover, Kagaya's eyes can be said to be the most primitive and most powerful Byakugan. How can he not see through their concealment? Watergate and Nangongja themselves are ninjas with rich combat experience. When they saw that they could no longer hide, Nangongja and Watergate directly launched an attack on Kagaya. Although they lost the advantage of hiding and launching a surprise attack, it is precisely because they have lost their way of retreat that both Watergate and Nangongja have an indomitable momentum. Like two sharp knives, Nangongja and Watergate rushed straight towards Kagaya's position. In order to ensure their sprint speed, Watergate only condensed 2 Rasengan in his hands, and Nangongja only filled his sword with sword energy. Nangongja and Watergate intend to fight hand-to-hand with Kagaya. It's a hand-to-hand battle where they exchange injuries and even fight to the death. Perhaps the power of ninjutsu is indeed very great, and the effect is also very brilliant, but the real thing that can really entangle the enemy is the close-range taijutsu. Watergate himself is a ninja who is very good at close combat. Even the Rasengan developed by Watergate himself is not a long-range attack. As for Nangongja, as the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, which was a sect that cultivated internal energy, he was naturally proficient in close combat. His swordsmanship was exquisite and peerless, and he even had a powerful attack like the sword chi to increase his attack power. Looking at Nangongja and Watergate rushing towards him without fear of death, the power in Kagaya's body also surged. He opened his hands and 2 gray-brown bone spurs appeared directly in his hands. Kill gray bones. The gray-brown bone spurs appeared directly in Kagaya's palm, but Kagaya didn't directly force these bone spurs out completely, but let these bone spurs still grow in his palm, as if 2 bone swords emerged from his body. Kagaya didn't pay attention to Nangongja, who was rushing towards him with Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand. Instead, he directly turned around and rushed directly towards Watergate's position with his unparalleled speed. In the face of a pincer attack, the most effective method was not to directly fight to the death with the obviously stronger side of the two, but to directly defeat the relatively weaker side of the two, so that the so-called pincer attack would no longer exist. Under Otsutsuki Kagaya's calculation, the gray-brown bone spur directly pierced the 2 Rasengan in Minato's hand. The Rasengan itself is actually a cluster of chakra that is barely stable. Once the internal balance is destroyed or the outside is hit to a certain extent, the Rasengan will directly explode. At this moment, the Rasengan in Minato's hand is mixed with a small amount of Senjutsu chakra, which is close to the Senjutsu Futon Rasengan, an inferior version of the Senjutsu or Rasengan. But even if it's an inferior version of the Senjutsu or Rasengan, it still has far more power than an ordinary Rasengan. Minato himself was prepared to use injury for injury or even death to entangle Otsutsuki Kagaya, so when he saw that Otsutsuki Kagaya directly attacked the Rasengan in his hand, Minato also directly accelerated his speed and rushed in the direction of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Both of them were extremely fast, almost in an instant they had already arrived in front of each other. According to Minato's judgment at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya should continue to directly attack the Rasengan with the 2 gray-brown bone spurs in his hand. After all, in such a close contact, there is no possibility for Kagaya to change his move. At that time, it turned out that Watergate's own expectations were still a little off. Kagaya really changed his move in such a situation. The sharp bone spurs that were originally aimed at the 2 Rasengan were now aimed directly at Watergate's chest. Even if the 2 Rasengan were about to attack his chest, Kagaya still didn't seem to retreat. In such a battle, Otsutsuki Kagaya was in an advantageous position. There was no need to take the risk of fighting Minato in such a desperate way, unless Otsutsuki Kagaya himself had something to rely on. Whether it is for Uchiha Obito or Uchiha Madara, after these 2 people absorbed the Jubi and entered the 6 paths mode, there is no way to cause enough damage to them just by relying on ordinary release techniques. However, energy such as Kenjutsu and Senjutsu chakra can still cause some damage to them, which is why although he doesn't have much Senjutsu chakra in his body, he still extracted a part of Chakra Sage Jutsu and integrated it into his attack. But seeing Kagaya fighting with him, Watergate's heart involuntarily became alert. After integrating a part of chakra into the Rasengan in his hand, barely maintaining the internal balance of the Rasengan, Watergate directly threw the 2 Rasengan in his hand towards Kagaya's chest. After throwing the 2 Rasengan in his hand, Minato immediately adjusted his body to avoid Otsutsuki Kagaya's attack. However, the 2 gray-brown sharp bone spurs still hit Watergate's left arm. At the moment of contact with Watergate's body, a gray aura directly drilled into Watergate's left arm, and this aura was still spreading rapidly. I can't keep this arm. Chapter 727. After decisively cutting off his left arm, Watergate immediately mobilized the chakra in his body to block all the blood vessels in his wound, so as to prevent his body from bleeding. Seeing Watergate cut off his left arm directly, whether it was Nangongja who was rushing towards Watergate and Kagaya, hoping to help Watergate, or Naruto and Sasuke, who were hiding in the dark, ready to use the Fuinjutsu on Kagaya and Nangongja, their eyes were full of shock at this moment. How important are hands for a ninja? Almost the vast majority of ninjutsu require a ninja to use his own hands to make hand seals to guide the chakra to display powerful ninjutsu. Only a few Kekkei Genkai and one-handed ninjutsu can get rid of this shackle. Watergate himself is a ninjutsu-type ninja. Using ninjutsu to coordinate his attack is an effective attack method for Watergate. Holding the trident Flying Thunder God Kunai in his left hand and the Rasengan in his right hand, he can attack and defend. This has always been Watergate's usual attack pattern. But now Watergate directly cut off his left arm. Whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, or Nangongja, they were naturally very shocked. And soon the reality made Naruto, Sasuke, and Nangongja see the benefits of Watergate's decisive behavior. The arm that was cut off by Watergate didn't fall to the ground, but it began to gradually collapse, as if it was weathered and then naturally decayed. One of his arms turned into ashes in an instant. Seeing such a situation, Watergate's heart was full of joy. Fortunately, he was able to cut off his left arm in time, regardless of the sacrifice. Otherwise, if the cold and gray aura that he felt was really transmitted to his body, then would his body directly become like his left arm that has now turned into ashes? After a little sigh in his heart, Nangongja and the other three had a clear understanding of the power of Kagaya's killing the gray bone. Kagaya Otsutsuki, the legendary goddess of Uno, ancestor of chakra. When such an existence did not hide his strength at all and vented his strength to his heart's content, how many people could stop him? In the battle and competition between people, although there is a slight gap between the two sides, as long as a person's spirit is strong enough and a person's will is strong enough, then there is still a possibility of defeating the opponent. But the gap between the two is not just a difference of a few centimeters, but a difference of 1,000 miles. Can one really defeat such an enemy just by relying on spirit and will? Of course, although the situation is very critical, whether it's Watergate, Nangongja, or Naruto and Sasuke, who are hiding in the dark and accumulating power to seal Kagaya Otsutsuki, none of them are the kind of people with weak minds. Even if Kagaya Otsutsuki is indeed powerful and invincible, none of the four people has lost the belief of fighting. Moreover, the four of them didn't have the slightest chance. Naruto and Sasuke's bodies also contained Rikudo Senin's 6 paths Yang Force and Rikudo Senin's 6 paths Yang Force and Rikudo Senin's 6 paths Yang Force. Even if the hope is slim, hope is still hope. Kagaya Otsutsuki attacked Watergate, Watergate hit Kagaya Otsutsuki, didn't avoid Kagaya's attack, Watergate cut off his arm. Although this series of things is a little complicated, in fact it only took a few breaths. Although Watergate suffered a slight loss, he also blocked Kagaya Otsutsuki's footsteps. At this moment, Nangongja also came to Kagaya Otsutsuki's side with his super speed. Watergate held the trident in his hand, and Nangongja held the sword of catastrophe in his hand. The two people actually launched a siege on Kagaya Otsutsuki. Although it seemed that Otsutsuki Kagaya had a powerful force that could seriously injure or even kill people in an instant, it was a very unwise choice to engage in close combat with him. However, Nangongja and Namikaze Minato still rushed towards Otsutsuki Kagaya with short weapons in their hands. The reason why Watergate and Nangongja did this is actually very simple. Because when Watergate cut off his left arm just now, he cut it off along with his clothes. Otsutsuki Kagaya's mutual killing gray bones has an extremely powerful corrosive and offensive power, but it also has a weakness that is not a weakness, that is, the target of the mutual killing gray bones is actually only a human body or an object with life aura. Once the target doesn't have any breath of life in the body, the gray aura and corrosive power contained in the gray bone will not have any effect. At this moment, Nangongja and Watergate's sword of catastrophe and Flying Thunder God's trident naturally don't have any breath of life, so this kind of dangerous but very effective attack is the most effective way to fight against Kagaya Otsutsuki's gray bone. As long as they are not hit by the gray bone spears condensed by the gray bone, then they will not be in any life-threatening danger. Watergate constantly used the body flicker technique that doesn't require any hand seals to change his posture, either dodging, blocking, or looking for gaps to attack. Watergate's ability to entangle the enemy to the extreme. Nangongja was holding this sword of catastrophe in his hand, constantly condensing his internal energy and sword chi in it. Once Watergate's strength is insufficient or he encounters an attack that he can't resist, Nangongja will directly take the Sword of Catastrophe and fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki to buy enough time for Watergate. Over and over again the two of them really entangled Kagaya Otsutsuki. Every time Kagaya Otsutsuki wanted to break through the pincer attack of Watergate and Nangongja, Watergate immediately pushed away and didn't fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki. Instead he replaced Kagaya with Nangongja, who has been accumulating power for a long time, to fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki. After Kagaya Otsutsuki's offensive posture is offset, Watergate will immediately rush forward like a slippery loach, and there is no way to catch him. Watergate and Nangongja relied on this method to buy time for Naruto and Sasuke to prepare the Rikudo Yin and Yang Power Seal. Chapter 728. Mother, we can't be entangled by them like this. Behind us, Naruto and Sasuke are now emitting a strong aura of 6 paths Yin and Yang. They must have learned from Hagoromo that you can only be sealed and can't be defeated. We must not be entangled by them. Black Zetsu, who was hiding in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve, didn't directly participate in the battle, so he directly saw the situation of the entire battlefield and was anxious. Black Zetsu himself is naturally 100% loyal to Otsutsuki Kagaya, but after all, Black Zetsu is a creature with self-consciousness. For so many years, Black Zetsu has been trying his best to revive his mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya, and now, after thousands of years of hard work, he finally resurrected his mother. But at this moment, his mother was entangled by 2 people, and standing behind them, there were 2 people with the power of 6 paths Yin and Yang, ready to seal his mother in the same way. Does he have to go back to the time when he was accumulating power and planning plans? And the reason why he was able to smoothly mix in the ninja world was mainly because he was hiding in the dark. This time, in order to help his mother resurrect, Black Zetsu himself was standing directly under the sun. Once Otsutsuki Kagaya is really sealed, then even if Black Zetsu still has considerable strength, he still can't avoid the fate of being a rat crossing the street in the ninja world. Shut up. How could Otsutsuki Kagaya not know that if he was entangled by Nangongja and Watergate at this moment, he would be in a dangerous situation? But at this moment, Nangongja and Watergate were almost desperate to delay time here. Even if he wanted to rush out, it would take some time. Whenever he was ready to use a powerful attack to force the 2 people back, Nangongja and Watergate would desperately break up his chakra, and then cooperate with each other to fight him again. The more Black Zetsu explained the battle situation to him, the more anxious Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was, and Black Zetsu just said something that should never be said. What I do, I don't need you to tell me what to do. Since you have always regarded yourself as my 3rd son, then remember Hagoromo and Himura are both your brothers. No matter what they do, they are still my children. It's not your turn to talk nonsense here. For Otsutsuki Kagaya, Hagoromo and Himura are 2 scars in his heart that can never be touched. Although Black Zetsu is indeed loyal enough, after all, Black Zetsu is just a strange existence born from the combination of yin-yang release and spiritual force. How can such a Black Zetsu be compared with Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Himura in the heart of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who was pregnant with him for 10 months and gave birth? Suddenly hearing Otsutsuki Kagaya's reprimand, Black Zetsu himself didn't react. After all, Otsutsuki Kagaya's attitude towards him was very intimate before. Perhaps it was because of Otsutsuki Kagaya's deliberate show of intimacy that Black Zetsu himself was a little bit complacent and lost his usual exquisite mind. I'm sorry, Mother. I said something wrong, but I still hope that Mother cannot be stingy with consumption now, and use the most powerful and effective attack to directly defeat these 4 people, otherwise there will be endless trouble. In fact, when Otsutsuki Kagaya opened his mouth and scolded Black Zetsu, he also felt a little regret in his heart. After all, his 2 children obviously no longer exist in the shinobi world, so Black Zetsu, who is hiding in his sleeve at the moment, is the closest person to him. Although his scolding just now can be regarded as somewhat reasonable, but how can the relationship between people be sorted out with a few simple words? Zetsu, I said something wrong just now, don't take it to heart. Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't know what kind of mentality drove him to admit his mistake to Black Zetsu. Otsutsuki Kagaya, who has always been the goddess of Uno, the ancestor of chakra, and other noble identities, is now admitting his mistake and apologizing to others. Mother, you don't have to mind. I know very well that Mother is also very annoyed with the current situation, so no matter what kind of emotions you show, I can understand. Mother doesn't have to mind. Although Black Zetsu's words were very understanding, and his performance was also very generous. However, as a woman, especially a very powerful woman, Otsutsuki Kagaya naturally felt a little estranged from Black Zetsu's seemingly indifferent prophecy. So, after all, the closest person to me still can't understand each other? Otsutsuki Kagaya sighed softly in his heart, but he still adjusted his mood. What he should consider now is not how to win over others, but to find a way to get out of the quagmire created by Minato and Nangongjia, and then not be sealed by Naruto and Sasuke's powerful Fuinjutsu containing the power of 6 paths yin and yang that they prepared together at this moment. All things in the world turn to nothingness. Expand the truth-seeking ball. The truth-seeking ball itself has the power to release the opposite power of the existence in contact with it, and then disintegrate the other party. However, because the truth-seeking ball itself is relatively small, it is generally only used to offset some ninjutsu. But at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya opened his hands, and the black truth-seeking ball was constantly expanding, as if there was no limit to its expansion. In the end, Otsutsuki Kagaya still listened to Black Zetsu's advice and used such a powerful ninjutsu that will consume a lot of his chakra. In the process of the truth-seeking ball's expansion, Nangongjia and Watergate, who have been wandering around Otsutsuki Kagaya and fighting, were directly forced to retreat. After all, the truth-seeking ball is different from the gray-brown bone spur formed by killing gray bone. The ability of the truth-seeking ball can be used on any substance. Nangongjia and Watergate are naturally not afraid of sacrifice, but Nangongjia and Watergate don't want their sacrifice to be meaningless, so Nangongjia and Watergate stopped attacking Otsutsuki Kagaya almost at the same time and withdrew. Chapter 729. The dark truth-seeking ball was constantly injected with pure and vigorous Jubi chakra, and the truth-seeking ball itself also became larger and larger due to the accumulation of chakra in the body. It slowly grew from the size of a normal tennis ball. In just a few breaths, the truth-seeking ball directly expanded into a huge sphere with a diameter of nearly 3 meters. Kagaya's slender figure was so obvious in comparison to the expanding truth-seeking ball. Although Watergate and Nangongjia themselves have a certain amount of experience and knowledge, Naruto and Sasuke, who have the power of 6 paths and the power of 6 paths in their bodies, can see it more clearly. Behind Naruto, there is also a truth-seeking ball with the same nature as the expanding truth-seeking ball that Kagaya used, but because of the same nature he can better understand Kagaya's strength. The reason why Naruto can have the truth-seeking ball is mainly because of the small amount of Jubi chakra in his body that was taken by Uchiha Obito from Uchiha Madara's body, and the other part is the power of 6 paths activated in his body by 6 paths Sannin. The power of Jubi chakra and the power of 6 paths complements each other, which allows Naruto to enter such a mode that is similar to 6 paths mode, but is different from Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Madara who absorbed Jubi and became Jubi column force. At this moment, the person in front of Naruto and Sasuke can be said to be the source of all chakra, Kagaya Otsutsuki. The principle of yin and yang is also clear in Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart. When it comes to the purity of chakra, no one can surpass Otsutsuki Kagaya. Under such conditions, Otsutsuki Kagaya's truth-seeking ball was naturally far beyond the scope of Naruto's understanding and coping with in all aspects. Such a powerful truth-seeking ball, is it really a power that should exist in the world? No one can answer Naruto's words because at this moment, everyone is not thinking about how to break such a truth-seeking ball, but how to survive under the truth-seeking ball's obliteration. You foolish people. I am the goddess of Uno Kagaya Otsutsuki. You live in the world, men steal and women prostitute, filthy. For thousands of years, you still attack each other without rest. This land is red because of you, the sky is full of blood. Tears. Millions of years ago, I once gave you all a chance and helped you quell the chaos caused by the war between you all. However, up until now you still don't know how to cherish it. How stupid are you? Since you are so stupid, I will to chaos to eliminate your sins. Kagaya, in her hand, Kagaya. Her lips moved a little, and her voice spread directly throughout the shinobi world. Whether it was the ninjas on the battlefield who were lucky enough not to be illuminated by the blood moon and avoided the attack of the tree, or those who were hiding in their own fortresses and praying that they could successfully pass through this danger, they all heard Otsutsuki Kagaya's voice at this moment. Kagaya is different from Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito pursued conquest and controlled the entire shinobi world in their own hands. Even the so-called Eye of the Moon project, in the end will keep the lives of others, but they will fall into genjutsu and listen to their orders. But what Kagaya clearly showed at this moment is not the so-called conquest, but complete annihilation. Everything in the shinobi world is regarded as a disdainful garbage, and now Kagaya sees himself as a person who will clean up the shinobi world. As for control, thousands of years ago Kagaya has already done it, and this kind of control is not attractive to Kagaya at all. Kagaya's purpose is to destroy the world? After hearing Kagaya's declaration, Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja were naturally the most emotional people on the battlefield. After all the previous actions of Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito were just to pull everyone in the shinobi world into Genjutsu space, and use Genjutsu to bind everyone and bring eternal peace to the shinobi world. Although everyone in the 5 great shinobi villages was full of condemnation for their actions and plans, but in essence their starting point is understandable, but their behavior is indeed a bit extreme. But now, the first sentence of Kagaya's mouth is to directly destroy the world. Conquest and destruction, although sometimes seem to be the same thing, but the mentality is different. What conquest requires is to take control of what you desire in your own hands. The means and attitude can be tough, but at least this thing can't be too damaged, otherwise how can it be regarded as conquest? Destruction, on the other hand, is pure destruction. The destroyer destroyed everything in sight. It made no difference to the destroyer whether these things were broken into pieces or directly annihilated into dust. We must find a way to stop him. The shinobi world can't be destroyed like this. Whether it is Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongji, such a strong voice appeared in their hearts at this moment. Maybe the 4 of them are in different camps, and maybe the 4 of them have different goals, but this shinobi world is an important existence for them to realize each other's demands and wishes. Once the shinobi world no longer exists, then how can their personal demands and wishes be realized? At the same time, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja all gathered around Naruto at this moment. At this moment, the expanding truth-seeking ball used by Kagaya is essentially the same as the truth-seeking ball that appeared behind Naruto. As long as they can get a certain degree of understanding from Naruto, maybe everyone can really solve the crisis at this moment. Naruto can naturally also perceive the trend and purpose of the other 3 people approaching him, but the more people look forward to it, the more the sadness in Naruto's heart became stronger. Doesn't Naruto want to find a way to solve the crisis as soon as possible? Naruto, who has the truth-seeking ball, thinks more than anyone else and sees the reality more clearly than anyone else. The power he uses is far less than the truth-seeking ball controlled by Kagaya. As long as chakra exists, it will not be destroyed at all. And Kagaya is obviously inextricably linked to the Jubi, and has almost endless chakra. How can such an enemy be defeated? Naruto really can't think of the slightest way. Once the amount of chakra is insufficient, the truth-seeking ball will naturally break through his defense and directly attack his body. In the previous battle with Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito, the reason why Senjutsu Chaz and Sword Chi, which are more condensed than ordinary energy, can break through the defense was because the Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito's truth-seeking ball's ability to neutralize objects wasn't pushed to the extreme. The truth-seeking ball only consumed a part of its energy, and it directly broke through the defense and attacked Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. But such a weakness is not a weakness at all for Kagaya, who is almost as powerful as the Jubi. Using the truth-seeking ball to offset the entire shinobi world is something that Kagaya can do. It's just to wear down a few attacks and wear down a few ninjas who are far inferior to him. For Kagaya, there is no pressure at all. The only weakness that can be targeted is directly made up for by Kagaya's own strength at this moment. What method should the 4 of them use to defeat Kagaya? Everyone's eyebrows were locked. In such a predicament, there was no effective solution for them, so they could only frown here, but they couldn't find a way to deal with Otsutsuki Kagaya. However, just when everyone was at a loss, Nangongja suddenly stood up from the crowd and said to Naruto, Sasuke, and Watergate, "I have a way here that is not a way." Now that everyone is at a loss, suddenly Nangongja said that he has a way. Everyone naturally has no reason not to listen. After the 3 of them nodded, Nangongja also began to talk about his so-called method to everyone. Indeed, from the perspective of the truth-seeking ball itself, there is no weakness. Even if there is a weakness, Kagaya Otsutsuki relied on his own strength to make up for this weakness. But why don't we pull our thinking out of the confrontation technique? Correct our thinking? Stop thinking about confrontation technique? Although Nangongja had only said a few words, the people who were present were all sharp-witted and quick to understand. Since it's not confrontation technique itself, then the only thing that can be used to fight is the existence of the caster. In the previous plan, in fact, everyone worked hard with the goal of sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya. But after Kagaya Otsutsuki vowed to destroy the world, everyone began to think about how to stop Kagaya Otsutsuki from destroying the world, instead of defeating and sealing him. Everyone fell into a misunderstanding. Indeed, no one has a way to fight against the almost perfect truth-seeking ball, but everyone has a way to fight against Kagaya. The 6 paths of yin and yang power in Naruto and Sasuke's body. All the problems finally returned to the original origin again, to defeat Kagaya and bring hope to the shinobi world. It seems that you all understand what I mean. Instead of being entangled here on how to deal with the truth-seeking ball, it's better to concentrate on thinking about how to defeat and seal Otsutsuki Kagaya. Truth-seeking ball is just a ninjutsu, and Kagaya is the root of all the chaos. Looking at the 3 people around him with a look of understanding, Nangongja slowly said to the 3 of them. Chapter 731. The huge chakra in Kagaya's body continued to gather in the huge truth-seeking ball in her hand. Looking at the truth-seeking ball in her hand getting bigger and bigger, Kagaya's heart wasn't as calm and indifferent as when she made the declaration of the destruction of the world. In the final analysis, although Otsutsuki Kagaya's character is very extreme, and sometimes his behavior is very incomprehensible, but Otsutsuki Kagaya himself can also be regarded as a kind person. She loved her children dearly. She loved the world dearly. It is precisely because her love is too deep, so deep that it is difficult to extricate herself, that Kagaya's twisted personality made her do so many seemingly cruel things. But every time she makes a difficult decision, every time she makes a cruel choice, Kagaya's heart is filled with endless sorrow, suffering for her own actions. But even if her heart is very painful and tormented, Kagaya's heart always believes that everything she does is for the sake of this world. May you rest in peace. Kagaya's eyes gently swept across the ground under her feet. After a slight sinking of her heart, she closed her eyes and whispered softly as if praying for the beings that are about to be destroyed by her. As soon as Otsutsuki Kagaya's voice fell, suddenly the sharp sound of the air being torn apart appeared in his ears. His brows furrowed slightly, and his originally pure and holy face was now slightly distorted. Kagaya's personality is very twisted, and the thing that Kagaya can't tolerate the most is that someone dares to disobey her will and do things beyond her plan. In other words, I, the goddess of Uno, Kagaya Otsutsuki, didn't want this world to be ruined by you, so I forced myself to endure the sadness of destroying so many lives and granted you death. Why don't you accept my final mercy? Why do you have to come out and resist? What's there to resist with your current appearance? Just die properly. Kagaya gently pushed her hands, and as if the expanding truth-seeking ball was stuck in the sky, she directly shattered the small sword formed by the chakra that was shot towards her. Nangongja? In the ninja world, there is no one else who can use chakra and pose a threat to her except for Nangongja. Such a so-called internal force practitioner that Otsutsuki Kagaya had never heard of, relied on his own strength to make the ancestor of chakra Kagaya remember his name. Black Zetsu was hidden in Kagaya's sleeve. He had been telling all kinds of information to Kagaya, but he didn't know when he started to become silent. Black Zetsu has absolute loyalty to Kagaya from the depths of his soul, but loyalty doesn't mean that Black Zetsu can ignore his ego and be loyal to Kagaya, so Black Zetsu chose to be silent at this moment. Why did Hagoromo and Himura attack Kagaya, who was his mother, and seal her away for such a long time? Kagaya's mother, Kagaya's mother, Kagaya's mother's Azaz. Himura and Hagoromo didn't know how many times they used various means to persuade their mother not to regard all the lives in this world as strategic resources for the future war. But time and time again, in exchange for their mother's anger, Kagaya still directly absorbed many people into the chakra tree, turning them into her own energy source, and using them as a blueprint, she transformed a large number of war weapons. White Zetsu. No words can describe the disappointment and anger of Himura and Hagoromo towards their mother. Himura and Hagoromo looked at their mother who was infinitely loving to them, but at this moment she was so cold-blooded and ruthless to all living beings, and their hearts were filled with fear and anger towards Kagaya. For the 2 brothers, Kagaya Otsutsuki was no longer just their mother. Before their mother, Kagaya Otsutsuki was a terrible demon who would sacrifice the whole world for her own selfishness at any time and place. Kagaya's cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness not only forced her 2 children to oppose her, but also pushed Black Zetsu further and further away from her. Black Zetsu's silence didn't stop Nangongja's group of 4 from attacking. Immediately after the sword chi, 9 huge Rasengan containing the tailed beast chakra appeared. Naruto decomposed the turbid Jubi chakra in his body, and directly pushed the Jubi chakra into the respective chakra of the nine-tailed beasts and the power of Geto as a binder. In the six paths mode, Naruto directly condensed the golden chakra on his body into a giant golden hand, and condensed the power of Geto, six paths, and the respective chakra of the nine-tailed beasts into the Odama Rasengan with the tailed beasts' respective chakra attributes. Uncle Nangong helped me restrict the actions of Kagaya Otsutsuki. Feeling that his nine-tailed beast Odama Rasengan containing great power were close to Kagaya Otsutsuki, Naruto suddenly shouted at Nangongja. After hearing Naruto's words, Nangongja, who was constantly accumulating sword chi in his body, burst out. Wisps of sword chi directly emerged from Nangongja's body, and these sword chi quickly condensed into the shape of the sword chi that was condensed before to break through the space barrier. 10,000 swords. Nangongja has never liked to name his moves, and almost all of them are named according to the characteristics of his moves. The simple 10,000 swords made everyone's heart full of shock, because at this moment, there were really countless sword chi swords condensing around Nangongja's body. A large number of sword chi swords under Nangongja's control were constantly flowing in the air like a long river. Compared to the violent destructive power of the sword chi dragon, the torrent of small swords at this moment is undoubtedly more pervasive, and has the effect of killing and trapping the enemy. Even for a moment, the light emitted by the small swords and the torrent of sword chi far exceeded the brilliance of the nine-tailed beast Odama Rasengan displayed by Naruto. Chapter 732. The torrent of sword chi went against the flow and rushed directly in the direction of Kagaya. The torrent of sword chi directly wrapped around Kagaya's body like a long river, and the dense sword chi directly wrapped Kagaya's body tightly in it. Quality and quantity have always been difficult to coexist. Nangongja condensed a large amount of sword chi and internal strength to form a small sword, and this huge amount of sword chi torrent naturally had a certain difference. The larger the number, the weaker the power contained in the individual. After Nangongja had confirmed that he had enveloped Kagaya in the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi, Nangongja also passed a look to Uchiha Sasuke, who was preparing on the side. Sasuke immediately understood and condensed his dojutsu chakra, and the six paths of yin in his body into his eyes. A flame was condensing in Sasuke's eyes. Rikudo, Mangekyo Dojutsu, Amaterasu. Originally, the Amaterasu flame only used chakra and dojutsu as its own fuel. At this moment, there was a powerful force called the six paths of yin in it. The higher the level of the burning energy, the greater the power of the Amaterasu flame itself. At this moment, the Amaterasu flame burned with eternal Mangekyo Dojutsu, 6 Tomo Rinnegan Dojutsu chakra, and the six paths of yin as fuel. At this moment, it also had a powerful force enough to hurt Kagaya. The torrent of sword chi displayed by Nangongja formed a cage that wrapped Kagaya in it, and the Rikudo Mangekyo Dojutsu, Amaterasu launched by Uchiha Sasuke made up for the possible loopholes in the torrent of sword chi, tightly imprisoning Kagaya in it. The real killing move was the tailed beast Odama Rasengan created by Naruto using the nine-tailed beast chakra, senjutsu, and the six paths of Yang's power. The nine-tailed beast Odama Rasengan containing the chakra nature of the nine-tailed beasts were directly suspended in the air under Naruto's control. They were directly connected like planets around the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. The nine-tailed beast Odama Rasengan didn't directly attack Kagaya, who was imprisoned by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. Instead, they floated in the air, constantly revolving around Kagaya, releasing their aura wantonly. Shikaku Nikomata Isabu, Sun Wukong King Mu Rhino Inu Halcyon, Ox Demon, and Karama. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can hear me, please work hard to resist. Now, not only are your lives and your consciousness in danger of extinction, but more importantly, even if your consciousness and your life are destroyed, your remaining energy will still be controlled by others, and all of this energy will be used to destroy countless lives. Naruto looked at Kagaya, who was surrounded by the torrent of sword chi, the Amaterasu flame, and the nine-tailed beast chakra, and loudly called out the names of the nine-tailed beasts. The aura of the tailed beast Odama Rasengan was also deliberately released by Naruto. Kagaya, who was wrapped in the torrent of sword chi, naturally also felt the aura of the nine-tailed beasts released by Naruto's Odama Rasengan. Naruto's words were naturally heard by Kagaya. Oh, stupid. It's just a group of chakra. Because of the ability of yin-yang release, it got the so-called body and consciousness. Now that it has returned to the body of the Jubi, the useless consciousness and body have been wiped out at this moment. Azura, do you think that by just relying on your so-called shouting, you can make such energy regain consciousness? Don't be so naive. Although Kaguya was wrapped in the torrent of sword chi, Kaguya's voice still came out of the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. Kaguya's voice did not directly prevent Naruto from continuing to shout, and Naruto's voice still continued to drill into Kaguya's ears. Listening to Naruto's shouting, Kaguya, who was a little panicked because he was imprisoned, was completely eliminated at this moment. Kaguya thought that Naruto, Sasuke, Nangongja, and Watergate would do something threatening after imprisoning him, but just such a useless shout really made Kaguya feel useless. Listening to Uzumaki Naruto's hoarse shouting, Otsutsuki Kaguya's heart was filled with endless ridicule. At that time, the more he listened to Uzumaki Naruto's voice, Kaguya's face began to gradually change. At this moment in Kaguya's body, it was obvious that 9 different kinds of chakra slowly condensed into a chakra ball, and the chakra ball was swimming in Kaguya's body. Although Kaguya's physical fitness is extremely strong, the various kinds of chakra condensed into a chakra ball, or the power of frost or flame burned Kaguya's meridians, and the damage and pain from the inside of his body was thousands of times stronger than the pain on the surface of his body. In the end, Kaguya still couldn't bear the powerful pain from his body, and a shrill cry like a cuckoo crying blood directly rushed out of the sword chi cage formed by the torrent of sword chi. Hearing Kaguya's almost shrill cry, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, or Nangongja, their faces relaxed a bit. In the plan of the 4 people, the only uncontrollable factor is whether Naruto can awaken the will of the 9-tailed beast with his own strength. Although Naruto has been saying that he can use the Bijou chakra in his body to summon the will of the 9-tailed beasts in Kaguya's body. But Naruto can only vaguely sense it. Whether it is Sasuke, Watergate, Nangongja, or even Naruto himself, they are very uncertain about this kind of sensing. In fact, in the plan of the 4 people, there is also a second plan to implement if it is difficult to awaken the will of the tailed beasts. However, perhaps it was luck, or the Bijou itself wasn't completely absorbed by Otsutsuki Kaguya. Naruto awakened the 9 Bijou's will again, which directly crippled Otsutsuki Kaguya's ability. Chapter 733. Otsutsuki Kaguya's chakra riot, which was beyond his expectation, directly appeared in his body. Otsutsuki Kaguya's own powerful strength itself comes from the almost endless chakra in his body and his physique far beyond that of ordinary people. Now the chakra in his body that belonged to the 9-tailed beasts suddenly rioted, almost simultaneously affecting Kaguya's own 2 major advantages and suppressing Kaguya's own strength, reducing the strength gap between Kaguya and Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja, giving the 4 people a greater possibility of winning. After Nangongja and Sasuke looked at each other, the 2 directly removed their control of the sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame. The sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame lost their energy supply and gradually disappeared in the air. Kaguya, who was originally in the cage built by the sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame, lost his shackles at this moment. Not only did he not directly jump out like a trapped dragon, but he directly fell from the sky as if he had lost his support. Kaguya himself had the ability to float in the air almost instinctively, but at this moment, Kaguya fell directly to the ground like a feather falling from the sky. His painful and mournful scream echoed in everyone's ears, but no one had the slightest pity in their hearts. Since they have already stood on the opposite side of each other, forgiveness is the most irresponsible way of doing things. What they should do now is to do their best to exert their most powerful strength and completely defeat Otsutsuki Kaguya without any room for resistance. Minato, who had not moved and disappeared, suddenly appeared above Otsutsuki Kaguya. In the first sword energy sword that Nangongja released towards Otsutsuki Kaguya before, it actually contained Minato's chakra. After Otsutsuki Kaguya directly stretched out his hand and shattered such a sword energy sword, it was actually equivalent to Minato's flying thunder god imprint on his body that doesn't have a long time. After coming to the side of Kaguya, who was constantly falling from the air, Watergate did not use any ninjutsu, but used chakra to greatly increase his physical strength. One of his hands turned into a hand blade, and a huge force was contained in it. Watergate directly chopped his own hand blade towards Kaguya's neck. Whether it's an ordinary ninja or Otsutsuki Kaguya, the ancestor of chakra, although their destructive power, resistance to ninjutsu, and other aspects are different, but ninjas are at a relative disadvantage when it comes to tempering their body because of their excessive pursuit of attack power. At this moment, because of the chakra in his body, Kaguya's control of his body has naturally been reduced to an extremely weak level. Now Kagaya watched Watergate attack him like this. Even if Kagaya has tried his best to adjust his body so that he can avoid Watergate's attack, but after all, he is not as flexible as Watergate. The hand blade containing a huge force directly chopped on Kagaya's neck. "You bastard! How dare you attack my mother?" Although Black Zetsu complained about Kagaya's previous reprimand, the trivial complaint can't offset Black Zetsu's almost instinctive loyalty to Kagaya. Seeing his mother being directly attacked by Watergate, Black Zetsu's consciousness seems to have fallen into a coma. This situation naturally made Black Zetsu unable to continue to sit down, and directly rushed out of Kagaya's sleeve. His black body has been completely distorted at this moment, like a black tentacle rushing directly towards Watergate's body. Since Nangongzhe and the others can cooperate so closely, they can directly stun Kagaya. Then this strange existence hidden in Kagaya's sleeve will naturally not be ignored by Nangongzhe and the others. Watergate looked at Black Zetsu rushing towards him and immediately took out a scroll from his arms. When discussing the content of the battle just now, everyone was quite helpless when mentioning Black Zetsu, but they can't directly destroy Black Zetsu, but they can also directly use a seal to seal Black Zetsu. Watergate extracted a part of Naruto's chakra with the characteristics of the Uzumaki clan and injected it into a scroll he carried with him. With his own will as the brush and Naruto's chakra as the ink, Watergate directly drew a temporary seal with the characteristics of the 4 symbols seal and the 8 trigram seal on the scroll. Watergate saw the trajectory of Black Zetsu's attack and directly pulled the scroll in his hand. The open scroll in Watergate's hand was constantly dancing like a ribbon. The scroll was constantly dancing. Watergate also hoped to touch a part of Black Zetsu's body with the movement of the scroll. As long as he can touch Black Zetsu's body, the seal engraved in the scroll by Watergate will directly exert its power and seal Black Zetsu in it. Although Black Zetsu knows that Watergate wants to use the scroll in his hand to deal with him, but at this moment in order to protect his mother, he can't retreat at all. Therefore Black Zetsu can only directly attack Watergate despite knowing that there is danger in front of him. Most of Black Zetsu's efforts have been spent on planning various plans over the years, and naturally he has less time to hone his strength. Moreover, Black Zetsu himself is different from ordinary humans. The chakra in his body and his physical strength are weaker than ordinary people, so compared to Watergate, Black Zetsu's strength is still much weaker. After several deliberate moves by Watergate, Black Zetsu's body was directly touched by the scroll in Watergate's hand. At the moment when the scroll touched Black Zetsu's body, the text in the scroll in Watergate's hand was constantly surging as if it was alive. Chapter 734. Layers of King Kong chains directly wrapped around Black Zetsu's body, directly wrapping Black Zetsu's twisted body tightly. Even if Black Zetsu constantly changed his posture, those King Kong chains were still tightly wrapped around Black Zetsu like maggots in tarsal bones, unable to move at all. No dash. No dash. No dash. Black Zetsu could clearly feel that his body was constantly being invaded by chakra in the King Kong chains, and his body was constantly being controlled. Even if Black Zetsu struggled with all his strength, he still couldn't break free from the shackles of the King Kong chains. Black Zetsu's body was constantly pulled into the seal scroll, and his body turned into black characters, which were directly sealed in the scroll. Black Zetsu's cry full of fear and struggle came to an abrupt end at the moment when Black Zetsu was completely sealed in the scroll. After seeing that Black Zetsu was completely absorbed into the seal scroll, Watergate also quickly closed the scroll directly. After all, this seal scroll was not a carefully made scroll with long-term effect. The seal text on it was very fragile. Once it was destroyed, its effect would be eliminated. Seeing Otsutsuki Kagaya's last barrier, Black Zetsu was directly sealed. Naruto and Sasuke, who had been preparing on the side, also began to act at this moment. Mobilizing the 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies to the extreme, Naruto and Sasuke represented the 2 extremes of yin and yang power in the world at this moment. They repelled each other but also attracted each other. An indescribably powerful fluctuation spread directly between Naruto and Sasuke. At this moment, Naruto and Sasuke directly rose from the ground as if they had escaped from gravity. Naruto and Sasuke directly hit their fists on the left and right sides of Otsutsuki Kagaya. The 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies invaded Otsutsuki Kagaya's body almost instantaneously. After the 6 paths of yang power released by Naruto entered Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, it immediately pulled the yin attribute chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The yin power released by Sasuke pulled all the yang attribute chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The power in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body was undoubtedly huge. The yin and yang power released by Naruto and Sasuke was actually equivalent to opening a dam in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, which was almost leakless body, so that Otsutsuki Kagaya's dam, which stored a large amount of chakra, directly broke at this moment. With a little guidance of their yin and yang power, they directly pulled all the huge chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. After a large number of chakra was pulled into the air, it began to evolve into a variety of strange scenes. But the most amazing thing was that a large number of yin and yang chakra automatically gathered together at this moment, forming a huge unknown Buddha statue. The huge sphere came to the real world, and on the way, it seemed to be constantly absorbing all kinds of substances, and its body size became bigger and bigger. After thousands of years of planning and hatred, at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya was sealed again as an ending. It was quite emotional to talk about it. Perhaps if Otsutsuki Kagaya wasn't so powerful and didn't swallow the chakra fruit, with Otsutsuki Kagaya's deep love for his child, he could have a simple, happy, and beautiful life. He didn't have to experience betrayal, and he didn't have to be directly submerged in the torrent of history. But there are no ifs, everything that has happened can't be changed, and the only thing that can be changed is the unknown future. And the ones who create the future are Naruto, Watergate, Sasuke, and Nangongja, who are standing on the battlefield at this moment. Chapter 735. Among the four of them, perhaps only Naruto didn't quite understand the current situation. He had been looking at his father, Watergate, and Nangongja and Sasuke with a slightly puzzled look. Although Naruto wasn't so proficient in politics, Naruto wasn't a fool either. At this moment, although the atmosphere between Watergate and Nangongja was obscure, Naruto could still fully recognize it. Watergate looked at Nangongja. Although his expression was serious, his face still maintained a gentle expression as he said to Nangongja, "Nangong-sama, thank you for standing up for the survival of the shinobi world and fighting for the entire shinobi world. In this war, whether it is our 5 great shinobi villages or your Blood Cloak Pavilion, we have suffered great casualties. After our 5 great shinobi villages have reorganized, we will invite you to join us for a post-war meeting to discuss a charter to make up for our losses." Watergate's words were sincere, and it can be regarded as giving up part of the 5 great shinobi villages' detached attitude towards the entire shinobi world. Originally, this meeting would only take place between the 5 great shinobi villages, but Watergate actually began to invite Nangongja to join. This was undoubtedly telling Nangongja that the 5 great shinobi villages have recognized that the Blood Cloak Pavilion is already a powerful force on par with them. As long as you are willing to take a step back now, then the Blood Cloak Pavilion will become the 6th force in the shinobi world, and together with the 5 great shinobi villages, they will control the entire shinobi world. Is such a condition tempting? Of course it is very tempting. If all the conditions mentioned by Watergate can really be achieved, then Nangongja will definitely agree to Watergate's proposal. But can Watergate's words really become a reality? Redistributing the huge cake that has already been divided, and letting the 5 great ninja villages dig out a part of the cake that has already been swallowed and give it to others to eat. How can such a thing be discussed in a meeting like the so-called Minato Shinobi? And from the perspective of the 5 great shinobi villages, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's participation in the war is actually after the 5 great shinobi villages have suffered a lot of losses and withstood part of the Akatsuki's attack. To a certain extent, such participation is also taking advantage of the 5 great shinobi villages. The 5 great shinobi villages will not tolerate such a force trying to take advantage of their own interests. In the end, wealth is tempting. Interests make people's hearts are hard to settle. It is too difficult to make the 5 great shinobi villages give up. Unless Nangongja can show his own powerful strength that the 5 great shinobi villages can't resist, and let the 5 great shinobi villages understand that dividing the benefits is a suitable choice, so that they can swallow the benefits that are in their mouths. Fourth Sama, the 4 shinobi, do you think shinobi, T? I can believe you because your character is well known. But I am not only myself, I am also the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I believe that I am only putting myself at risk, but as the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, I believe that you are putting all the members of the Blood Cloak Pavilion on a scale. Your character and credibility can make 1 person, 2 people, or even 10 or 20 people willing to risk their lives to believe in you, but do you think that your credibility is more precious than the lives of hundreds of people? Nangongja's words were actually very harsh. Watergate, who was standing opposite to Nangongzhi, heard Nangongzhi's words and his heart sank. He was indeed talking to Nangongzhi based on Nangongzhi's understanding of his character, but now Nangongzhi didn't represent his own interests, but the interests of the entire Bloodcloak Pavilion. If it was Watergate himself, he also wouldn't put such important interests on one person's character. Is this battle between us really unavoidable? Watergate looked at Nangongzhi standing opposite him with an indescribable expression. Whether from a public or private point of view, Watergate didn't want the 5 great shinobi villages to have to fight with the Bloodcloak Pavilion again after the battle with Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Obito, and Otsutsuki Kagaya. The 5 great shinobi villages really couldn't afford such a loss. But as Nangongzhi just said, Watergate was also very clear that if the Bloodcloak Pavilion really wanted to be on par with the 5 great shinobi villages, they must show their muscles well and let the 5 great shinobi villages understand the power of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. Otherwise, even if the Bloodcloak Pavilion could really win a part of the benefits with his help, in the end, this piece of meat in their mouths may be directly pulled out of their mouths. It's not us but the Bloodcloak Pavilion and this old world have to fight, otherwise the Bloodcloak Pavilion will have no room to survive. What does war mean? The most eye-catching thing is the flow of blood and the loss of life. Although Nangongzhi has experienced large and small wars, and the lives in his hands are more than hundreds of thousands, but with the increase of age and the accumulation of experience, Nangongzhi more and more hoped that he could solve the problem as much as possible through some more gentle means. However, the world will not change because of one person's will, and the reality still forced Nangongzhi to take the lives of people over and over again. Now Nangongzhi still has to fight. Because Nangongzhi is the head of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, Nangongzhi has to fight for the future of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. Sasuke. Let's go. After Sasuke heard Nangongzhi's words, the 6-tomo Rinnegan in his eyes quickly rotated, directly creating a passage connecting the origin sphere and the real world. Nangongzhi took out a blood-colored jade pendant from his bosom. He clenched his fist and shattered the jade pendant. A blood-colored light shot up into the sky from the jade pendant's fragments. When the Bloodcloth Pavilion disciples who were still able to move on the battlefield saw the light beam, they all took the injured Bloodcloth Pavilion disciples who could not move on their own and left in a certain direction as if they had planned this beforehand. Sasuke also left with Nangongzhi. Naruto stood beside Watergate and watched Nangongzhi and Sasuke leave together. Originally, Naruto wanted to rush forward and directly ask Sasuke and his uncle Nangong why they had to fight. However, he was stopped by Watergate. When the blood in his head subsided a little, Naruto also understood that there was no way to persuade his father or uncle. He could only watch them lead their men to fight. He was clearly a savior who had just saved the entire world, but now he was still so powerless. Chapter 736. Naruto could only helplessly watch everything happen in front of him. He thought that as long as he defeated Otsutsuki Kagaya, there would be no more wars in the ninja world. But now it seems that Naruto thought too much, because as long as a person's heart still has selfish desires, then the war will never end. Is it really impossible for people to understand each other, and can only achieve their goals by harming each other through war? Naruto couldn't find the answer, and could only be held by his father, Watergate Namikaze, to use the Flying Thunder God Jutsu to leave the defense of heaven that was about to collapse. After leaving the heaven's defense space, Nangongzhi and Sasuke immediately headed directly to the previously scheduled location without stopping. When Nangongzhi and Sasuke arrived at the designated location, the disciples of the Bloodrobe Pavilion had also gathered. Seeing that nearly 1/3 of the Bloodrobe Pavilion disciples had been reduced, Nangongzhi's eyes became uncontrollably wet. Nangongzhi didn't hide the sadness in his heart at the moment, but directly showed all his sadness. The disciples of the Bloodrobe Pavilion looked at their leader, who had always been serious and even a little bit cold at this moment, showing such emotions, and everyone's heart was also full of sadness. Looking at the disciples of the Bloodrobe Pavilion around him, Nangongzhi cupped his hands and saluted everyone, then said to the remaining disciples of the Bloodrobe Pavilion, "Everyone, I Nangongzhi have let you all down. If I had been stronger, I might have been able to end this war earlier and lessen our losses a little. Today so many disciples of the Bloodrobe Pavilion have been reduced, it's really my fault. I'm really sorry everyone." With that, Nangongzhi cupped his hands and bowed deeply to everyone. "You don't have to do this, leader. We all know that our sacrifice now is for the future, leader. You don't have to blame yourself so much. Our dead brothers will never blame the leader. We all know that the leader has done a lot for us, and has done a lot of things that he didn't want to do, "We are sorry for the leader." Sasuke stood to the side, watching the various performances of Nangongja and the many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. His face was still cold as he watched from the side, as if he was coldly observing everyone. There was no doubt that Uchiha Sasuke was firmly on the side of Nangongja for various reasons. But it wasn't the Blood Robe Pavilion that convinced Sasuke, but only Nangongja. Sasuke didn't have any feelings for the Blood Robe Pavilion. Obviously, Nangongja was trying his best to win people's hearts before the war. Sasuke didn't have any rejection or resistance to this approach, he just watched Nangongja flexibly display various techniques. Although Sasuke didn't want to learn and use such techniques, Sasuke believed that he should understand such means, otherwise if he encountered such a situation in the future, he might not have the means to deal with it. After a few words from Nangongja, the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion also became excited and full of fighting spirit. Seeing that the morale of the disciples was high, Nangongja finally pulled out the sword hanging on his waist and directly inserted it into the ground in front of him. The power of nature, internal strength, and sword energy poured into the sword. These energies constantly impacted the space, connecting the passage between the ninja world and the Lion Clan's different space. There were some geniuses of the Blood Robe Pavilion hidden in the Lion Clan's different space before the war, as well as some of their family members who had no fighting ability. There was also an elite team belonging to the Blood Robe Pavilion, acting as the last force to protect the families of the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. Although it was only a small team, it was actually composed of the top fighters of the Blood Robe Pavilion. When such a team was selected, none of the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion fought for such a place that didn't directly participate in the war. Because at this moment, everyone broke out with an extremely strong sense of fairness. The 120 people in the team were recommended by many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, and they were powerful existences with great potential in the Blood Robe Pavilion. Now, Nangongja opened the door connecting the Lion Clan's different space to the ninja world in order to summon such a powerful backup force. He wanted to compete with the ninja coalition formed by the 5 major ninja villages, which had already been defeated by Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Otsutsuki Kagaya. He wanted to win a place for internal strength cultivators in the ninja world. Nangongja's plan was basically clear to the high-level disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, and some low-level disciples also knew a little about it. Nangongja wasn't worried that his plan would be intercepted by the 5 major ninja villages, because the Blood Robe Pavilion was an organization that was too independent of the ninja world. Ninjas were existences who cultivated chakra, while the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion cultivated internal strength. The two types of energy can be said to be fundamentally different. In order to climb to a high position in the Blood Robe Pavilion, the most important condition was the level of internal strength. Such a request undoubtedly allowed the Blood Garment Pavilion to grasp all of its power tightly in its hands. Thousands of years of seclusion had not only filled the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion with an enterprising spirit, but also an extremely strong sense of exclusion. It was almost impossible to win over the high-level disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. After seeing Nangongja establish a space channel and summon them, the elite team of 120 people left the Lion Clan's different space and directly came to the ninja world. Supreme Sama. Everyone please rise. After seeing Nangongja, all the members of the team directly knelt on the ground and saluted to Nangongja. After Nangongja returned the salute, the elite team of the Lion Clan's different space began to look around at the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion outside. Many of the members of the elite team looked at their surroundings with disappointment, sadness, and anger. Many of their family members and friends were left behind in the outside world. After all, it was impossible for everyone in a family to be strong enough to meet the requirements. When they saw that their families and friends were gone, everyone understood that they had sacrificed themselves. Everyone was ready to sacrifice themselves, but their families and friends left them like this, which was quite difficult for the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion to accept. Chapter 737. While the Blood Garment Pavilion was preparing their troops and summoning all the forces they could muster, Shui men naturally wouldn't just stand there and do nothing. Forcibly suppressing the fatigue after the fierce battle with Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate traced the marks left by Orochimaru and Tsunade, and found the two who had not participated in the battle in the middle of the battle. They were more like bystanders. Orochimaru-sama. Tsunade-sama. Although he was already the supreme leader of Woodleaf Village, The two people standing in front of him were his sensei, Jiraiya's teammates. So whether it was from the position of the Sannin or for his own seniority, Watergate was very respectful to address them as Sama. Even if Orochimaru was still a traitor of Woodleaf Ninja Village. Yandame-sama, you don't have to be so polite. I'm just a traitor of Woodleaf. The crimes of that year will not be erased in any case. A traitor for a day, a traitor for a lifetime. Now I'm just a traitor of Woodleaf. You don't have to be so polite to a traitor, do you? Orochimaru looked at Minato with a smile on his face, as if he was judging other people. He put a layer of sin on himself. Standing on the side, Tsunade looked at Orochimaru and Watergate, and suddenly felt that she didn't quite understand what was going on with them. As the granddaughter of Woodleaf first Hokage and second Hokage, although Tsunade was not fully exposed to politics, she had a certain understanding of some political tactics and means. Since Watergate directly addressed Orochimaru as Sama, just now, it naturally represents Watergate's goodwill to Orochimaru. As long as Orochimaru can go with the flow, Watergate can use his own means to whitewash Orochimaru, and even take advantage of such an opportunity to push Orochimaru to a very high position. From then on, Orochimaru will no longer be a traitor of Woodleaf in the ninja world, but the backbone of his own ninja village. After experiencing this period of time with Orochimaru, Tsunade could clearly sense that Orochimaru's previous madness and paranoia seemed to have weakened a lot, and his whole person became wise and far-sighted. This kind of wise and calm Orochimaru was actually the original Orochimaru in Tsunade's impression. Tsunade wasn't very clear about what kind of thoughts Orochimaru had in his heart, but thinking about it from her perspective, Tsunade felt that Orochimaru was actually eager to return to Woodleaf at this moment. But clearly now that there was a way down, why did Orochimaru himself want to tear down the steps that Watergate deliberately built for him? To himself? Seeing Orochimaru's actions, Tsunade was just about to stand up and explain Orochimaru's behavior to Watergate and fight for the opportunity for Orochimaru to return to Woodleaf Village. But a figure came out of the cave where Orochimaru and Tsunade were hiding and put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder. Tsunade's personality was well known. In the entire ninja world, there was only one person who could put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder and not let her directly explode. That person was Yandame Hokage, Watergate's master, Jiraiya. Seeing Jiraiya put his hand on her shoulder, Tsunade also instinctively looked at Jiraiya's face. The battle just now made Jiraiya's body extremely tired, but Jiraiya's eyes were not cloudy. Instead they were somewhat bright. Jiraiya shook his head at Tsunade. Obviously he wanted to stop Tsunade from saying anything more. If there was anyone in the world who understood Orochimaru, then this person must be Jiraiya. Although he wasn't very clear about what Orochimaru was thinking at this moment, Orochimaru definitely wouldn't say this just to argue with Watergate. After Watergate became Hokage, Jiraiya already knew that Watergate could no longer be the original cheerful, sunny, and extremely gentle Watergate. After all, apart from the benefits that power brought, it also brought with it tremendous pressure and erosion. Although Jiraiya wasn't very clear about Orochimaru's plan at this moment, Jiraiya could still guess Watergate's plan. After the battle with Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Otsutsuki Kagaya, the 5 major ninja villages suffered heavy losses, but relatively speaking Woodleaf Village's strength loss was not so great. Now that Orochimaru was in a state of communication, Watergate would naturally try his best to pull Orochimaru into his camp. A Kage-level powerhouse can be said to be a mainstay for a ninja village. Once an existence like Orochimaru with enough deterrence returns to Woodleaf, Woodleaf will have more initiative in the future situation. Watergate can forgive Orochimaru's past sins, and his behavior of bringing Orochimaru back to the ninja village under pressure will also make Orochimaru completely labeled as Hokage. As long as Watergate's ambition in his heart reaches the point where it's difficult to suppress, then Watergate can directly conquer the other 4 ninja villages with the powerful strength of Woodleaf Village. After all, unlike the other ninja villages who almost came out of their nest, Woodleaf Village still left a considerable number of ninja in their own ninja village as a reserve force. In any case, Orochimaru-sama, you have made a lot of contributions to Woodleaf, but since ancient times, the flaws can't obscure the jade and I should respect you enough. Since you insist on bearing the burden of your sins, I naturally won't say anything more. But what we need to do now is not to settle old accounts. The war is still not over. Watergate didn't want to entangle too much with Orochimaru. After all, his sensei and his wife were standing here at the moment, and with their relationship with Orochimaru, they will definitely do their best to bring Orochimaru back to Woodleaf Village. Watergate said these words here at the moment to send a signal to his sensei and his wife. Now that his sensei and his wife obviously understood what he wanted to express, Watergate naturally didn't need to entangle too much with such things, and directly said the real reason why he came here. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.